One on his 25th birthday, his internship let him go. Then a scammer ripped him off at the station and his fake friends drank him into a stupor. Parents gone, completely alone and flat broke. Then he woke up on a snowy mountain with his entire apartment transported into a survival game. The gaming system gave him a massive power boost and two loyal beast companions who adored him, a tiny snow fox and a white tiger cub, the guy who had absolutely nobody finally. If you want to see how he survives, hit that subscribe button. That is the eternal deal with the algorithm. But let's back up to the day before all of this, when things were still going terribly wrong. His head felt like a slab of cracked stone when he woke up, his very first clear thought, a fierce vow. Never to drink with those animals again. He clutched his throbbing skull before he even opened his eyes, cursing the fake friends who had literally poured alcohol down his throat the night before. Yesterday was his 25th birthday, and it had easily been the absolute worst day of his life. Every single hour of it had found a new way to kick him, making this brutal hangover feel almost merciful by comparison. It had started that morning with a harsh call from his aunt, warning him to never set foot in his hometown again because he had embarrassed her family too much. The petty math of her grudge was simple. Back in his college days, she had bragged about him to her in-laws, hyping him up like some heaven-blessed prodigy, but then he graduated only to make barely 2,000 yuan a month, which left her with absolutely nothing to boast about. To make matters worse, his probation at work ended without a contract renewal, and they told him to pack up his desk immediately because new interns were already arriving. At noon, some random old lady bumped straight into him, accused him of assault, and he ended up stuck in a police station for the crime of refusing to pay her off. Even after officers watched the security footage, he still had to fork over 300 yuan just to make the headache go away. Then in the evening, his old college buddies called him out to celebrate, and the very second he showed up, they forced drinks down his throat until the entire room started spinning. How he got home afterward was an absolute mystery to him. The only real saving grace was those guys kept a tiny shred of decency and did not leave him somewhere dangerous to wake up robbed or worse. He lay in bed reviewing the sheer disaster as the morning sun stabbed through the blinds, convinced that every painful ache was just the typical hangover recovery. He slowly dragged himself toward the glass, half dreaming of the cheap street food stall downstairs, half planning to just boil some instant ramen if they were closed. But then he looked outside and completely froze. There were no cars parked along the road, no concrete path with dusty trees, and absolutely no breakfast stalls. There was only blinding white. He could not tell if it was heavy ice or deep snow, but the glare he had blamed on his drinking was actually bright sunlight bouncing off an endless frozen snowy plain. His eyes burned, prompting him to spin around and inspect his small room instead. The apartment at least looked familiar. It was the exact same cramped rental he had been living in, 15 square meters, holding a single bed, a tiny closet-sized bathroom, and a tiny kitchen near the door, complete with a small range hood and an electric pot for noodles or the occasional stir-fry. There was no fridge, just a shaky shelving unit, and absolutely no wardrobe either, only a basic metal rack for his clothes. For this cramped space, he paid well over 1,000 won a month, draining more than half of his miserable intern salary. Honestly, the folks back in his hometown would probably never even believe it. In there, he was a college graduate who landed a coveted job and drove a luxury car straight into a mansion. In reality, his life had been almost impossible to even describe. He did not dwell on any of that, though, because none of it had much to do with him anymore. His parents had died young without leaving much behind, and he had burned every bridge with his relatives by selling off the family house to pay for his studies. That sale taught him exactly what those people were worth. The bigger question was whether he had genuinely traveled to another world, dragging his apartment along with him. The room had not changed, and when he opened the front door, there was only white snow on the other side. He was forced to accept landing somewhere new with his whole rented apartment in tow. Other people in stories transmigrated with entire buildings. He had gotten drunk and apparently peeled a single room off someone else's building like a sticker. He decided it was all too fantastical to be funny. A smooth, amused voice spoke up right then, telling him the players recognized the new world, that survival mode was activating and the game was starting. It went on to announce his personal panel inventory and map coming online. A semi-transparent box bloomed in the air before him, the words scrolling in characters he Knew with the audio and subtitles running in sync, he had logged enough hours in internet cafes to recognize a settings menu immediately, so he thought the word and an interface obligingly popped open. The volume could be lowered, the panel resized, and even daily notifications muted, and since he had not run into any yet, he left it alone and only nudged the volume down. He thought the words personal panel and his information painted itself across the floating screen. The system tagged him as Yaben. From the Snow Mountain region, listed his race as human, his talent as none, and then proceeded to humiliate him one stat at a time. Health sat at 61, stamina at 42, energy 26, and his combat power was a tragic 3, flagged as below average for a human. His equipment was 4 pieces of basic, unattributed underwear, trousers, top, and flip-flops. His pet slot read none, and his inventory was empty at 0 of 10. His survival points stood at a perfect 0. He sighed at the absolute wreckage, though he was not surprised. He had been a frail desk jockey who drew blueprints and did not do much else. Right then, a new prompt announced that his beginner survival mission had activated. Of course, he thought, a game world would come with a beginner guide. He grumbled about it internally, but still opened the mission. Logged to see the details. The system told him he was randomly dropped onto a snow mountain where endless white would ache his eyes by day, but worse things waited at night. Before nightfall, he had to dig up supplies from under the heavy snow and build a protective fence. Requirements broke down into 4 separate parts, all marked incomplete. Find supplies. Open supply crates, use tools and materials, and build a basic fence. Only the first objective was active now, and everything had to finish before the sun went down. The clock in the corner of his panel read just before 5 in the evening, with a second line counting down a little over 3 hours until night, which it set for 8 that evening. He stared out at the blinding white snow and accepted that he had to go hunting for supplies out there. 3 hours might not be enough, but giving it his all was the only option on the menu. The trouble was that everything in every direction was a uniform blinding white, so he had no clue how he was supposed to find anything short of shoveling his way out 1 inch at a time. He had no snow tools and the stamina of a wet noodle, but he figured he would go out and chance it anyway. He kicked at the snow by his door with his flip-flop and felt absolutely no cold, making him wonder if some newbie protection shield was active. Keeping the deadly chill off him, scanning the area, he spotted a small, semi-transparent box icon hovering just ahead, looking exactly like a classic game loot marker. With absolutely no better lead to follow, he walked right on over, crouched down and brushed the deep snow aside until a crude wooden box appeared. The moment he picked up the small crate, the marker instantly winked out. The task prompt finally confirmed his search was done, and this rickety thing was indeed the supply crate he was sent to find. Talk about an insultingly simple start. He thought the command word collect, watched the supply crate drop neatly into his inventory, and hurried back to the safety of his small shelter before taking it out again to open it up. Inside was a pile of long strip-shaped wood, along with nails and a hammer. Gathering the planks, he relied on childhood farm chores to slot everything into his inventory and head back out to find a place for a fence. Looking for a good place to build a fence, about 2 meters out, he hammered the first board into the snow. A small yellow question mark popped up above it. When he reached out and touched the mark, it scattered into a web of lines showing him the possible direction and reach, plus how many planks each stretch would require. It was highly convenient, clearly designed so that anyone who had never done this kind of labor could easily build a fence. He picked the layout he liked, closed the system screen, and started driving the stakes in one by one, exactly a meter apart, until they ringed the cabin in a wide circle. Then he came back with the mystery box of nails that seemed to have an endless supply and pinned the boards onto the upright wooden stakes, one by one. It took over an hour, and the final fence was completely crooked with half the nails hammered in at weird angles, but the system did not seem to care. We do not judge right through all 4 requirements as complete, declaring his newbie mission done, and dropped the rewards straight into his inventory. He received beginner gear of his choice, a handy manual, and a box of basic survival supplies. He opened up the manual first and found a small paper booklet, which was a survival logbook, recording what he had completed and when plus what he had earned. It could be flipped through or searched by time or tags, but with only a single page inside so far, there was nothing to look up. Then the system told him he had successfully secured a basic safe zone, unlocking both the chat and trade channels. Out of pure curiosity, he opened both of them up. The trade channel was a ghost town, likely because everyone was as broke as he was, but the chat channel was already a massive river of scrolling text, filled with greetings and panicked questions about where on earth this place was, a flood of complaints and curses, people crying out for their missing family members, and every single person showing up under a. It was just a string of numbers, every single handle traced back to the exact same snowy mountain he was on, meaning this was just a regional chat. Right next to it sat a world channel. But when he tried to open it, the system told him it was locked until a player reached 100 combat power and spent 10,000 survival points. Strength and cash were both required, and he had absolutely neither. He sat down and opened the rest of his gear. The beginner box let him choose from a warm, cool, moisture-proof or antibacterial 5-piece set, and the smart move was to check his surroundings first, so he walked back to the door and opened it to test the weather, and a freezing wind immediately slammed into him hard, enough to make him shudder. His newbie protection period was officially over. Talk about a harsh wake-up call. He already missed wandering around in just slippers earlier, but losing that safety net early was not necessarily a bad thing, so he headed back inside and chose the warm 5-piece set without hesitation. Container dissolved and 5 pieces of gear scattered across the floor. A top, trousers, a hat, boots, and underwear. Every piece had warmth and defensive stats. Staring at the final item, a pair of thick padded boxer briefs, and really wondered why his undergarments needed their own warmth rating. Head, feet, body, those made sense, but these briefs were a mystery best left unsolved. And his quiet complaints did not slow his hands. He stripped off his thin starting clothes and pulled on the warm gear, ending up in a heavy jacket, thick trousers, sturdy boots, and a hat that completely swallowed his ears, leaving only his face exposed to the frost. The briefs went on underneath, never to be spoken of again. Fully geared up, he checked the clock and saw there was still more than an hour of daylight left, so he stepped outside to test it. The cold still bit hard, but at least he would not freeze. He marched around his tiny yard, felt the howling wind, and quickly ducked back inside. He definitely would not die out there, but standing in deep snow was never cozy. He closed the door tightly against the wind, sat back down, and opened the final box of basic survival supplies, which he figured was food. Opening it rewarded him 10 loaves of bread, 10 bottles of water, and 10 survival points, along with 100 points of basic shelter energy and 2 household items. He stashed the food and water away, watching his survival points update on the screen. Before switching over to the trading channel again, a few listings were already up from buyers and sellers, and strangely, some players were actually selling off their starter equipment while others bought. Could they really be that desperate? He could not be entirely sure, and since there was no way to verify, he had to focus on his own pile of gear anyway. That shelter energy stat still confused him until he noticed a house tab nestled right next to his main status panel. He clicked it open, revealing a simple apartment simulation model. The total energy reserve sat at 100 points, listing every basic piece of furniture inside as a virtual model: the light bulb, bed, toilet, water heater, shower, kitchen stove, cheap electric pot, clothes rack, and plastic storage rack. There were no physical wires, water pipes, or sewer lines anywhere. Instead, everything now operated entirely on pure energy draw. The toilet cost 0.1 points per use, and the shower took that same amount per minute. The cabin lights, water heater, electric kettle, and hood each drained 0.2 of a point for every minute they ran. Energy converted to survival points at a rate of 10 to 1, making his 100 reserve points worth 10 survival points. Once he got the hang of the upkeep, he turned in his 2 selected items. Opening one revealed several major categories, still locked away by region. And he chose Snow Mountain without a second thought. That split into house and yard. Seeing all that heavy snow piling up outside, he picked yard. The options were Snow Mountain yard tools. After scrolling through, he settled on a big broom for sweeping and a wide wooden shovel for clearing snow. He was basically trading a whole lifetime of transmigration luck for a simple broom, he thought. Still better than nothing. While the daylight lasted, he went out and started shoveling the heavy drifts inside the fence, flinging each load over the boards into the white wilderness beyond. The yard was pretty small, so it soon came down to a thin layer which he cleared away completely with the broom. He had not done hard manual work in years, and even though he had done plenty as a kid back in the countryside, he ended up drenched in sweat. His aching muscles screamed that this was definitely not the body of a kid anymore. The hard labor paid off, though. A sweet reward popped up the very instant the yard was clear, informing him that a tidy yard lifts the mood and wards off certain dangers, while handing over a single survival point. 1 point was not much, but he had not even realized a reward existed when he first started, so he accepted it gladly. Standing in the doorway looking out at his neat little yard, he felt pretty pleased with himself. By the time he finished, total darkness had fallen. He shut the door, washed his hands, and sat down to eat, deciding against turning on the lights. He had no fancy habits anyway, and absolutely zero intention of wasting precious reserve energy. A simple loaf of bread and a bottle of water filled his stomach well enough. Then he stretched out on the familiar bed and finally let himself absorb the crazy reality. He had been thrown into another world and turned into a game character. He had to admit, though, things could be worse. At least he had a roof over his head, lying there. His entire grim 20-odd years of life rearranged into something that looked almost lucky now. His parents had died in a sudden accident, leaving him no money, only a new house in the countryside. Selling that property had paid for a decent college education, though it earned him years of endless scolding from relatives for not keeping a fallback plan. His aunt had spent his college years bragging to her husband's family about her brilliant nephew, only to turn on him when graduation left him as a mere low-level office drone. His official registration had stayed in his hometown. When the local land consolidation needed the signatures, he had gone back to sign. He mentioned his small salary to someone and instantly triggered a flood of scolding calls. They were not even close relatives, but those harsh words still stung. The massive difference now was that he never had to think about them ever again. Talk about a clean slate. The room was tiny, but no rent to pay, no threat of landlords raising prices, and no boss to fire him or steal his paycheck. Still, he was not naive enough to think surviving here would be effortless. A true survival game lives and dies on exactly that, staying alive. He checked the clock, noticing it was barely past 8, not even 9, and he could not remember the last time he went to bed so early. Sleep simply refused to come. With the light completely off limits, there was absolutely nothing left for him to do. So he pulled up the chat channel to observe, showing no interest in making friends. His rule in any new place was always simple: watch first, talk later. Right away, he saw players constantly sniping at each other. One snapped that you could not even open this chat without finishing your first task, calling another player dramatic. Then someone else confessed to being incredibly foolish for believing a liar, even feeling sorry for him. Meanwhile, others bragged about never falling for it at all. Scrolling back through the logs, he quickly found the exact source. A player was complaining that he had no fence, shivering inside his wooden house, and hearing something massive clawing at the walls outside. Some soft-hearted people offered comfort, even offering to share their clothes so he would not freeze. But then, when someone actually tried to send the items, the crying man went silent. It was not until another player pointed out a critical detail, that accessing this chat required completing the fence first, that the crowd turned on him, calling him a scammer. Seriously, you cannot escape con artists anywhere, even here. He barely knew how this game world worked, yet some grift was already running. Once the fake scam got exposed, the channel quickly rolled on to calmer subjects. People compared their houses, detailing room layouts and daily chores. It was normal, everyday survival talk, full of immediate needs and guesses about the future. Players with larger shelters had apparently struggled much more, especially when constructing their protective fences, though a spacious shelter offered far more usable room. That meant more usable space. Suddenly, the topic shifted to overall combat power. A user who claimed to be a former martial arts champion spoke up, revealing his combat power was only 8, which immediately triggered an absolute storm of replies. Surprisingly, most ordinary players scored somewhere between 3 and 7. A rare few claimed a score of 9. By the end, the ranking scale became clear. 4 and below meant weak, 5 through 7 was average, and 8 or 9 clearly marked a person as a strong, capable adult. Suddenly, someone asked, half joking, if a single combat PowerPoint was actually the absolute rock bottom, because even his single point was flagged as weak. He wondered if anyone had 0. A brief silence fell over the chat, followed immediately by supportive words and confessions. One man confessed his 80-something father still had 2 points, the lowest seen. Another user mentioned his 2-year-old had just 1 point, asking the weak player how he had managed to be so incredibly feeble. So the system ran in a family mode too. That was the exact part that caught his attention. Not the combat numbers, but how many players kept mentioning their families. He was completely alone, in life and in registration, with nobody around. Nobody could possibly be here with him, for those with actual families did this world. Reward strength in numbers, or did more mouths just mean faster starvation? None of it mattered to him, so he simply noted it, filed it away, and watched the chat scroll. Heavy drowsiness finally crept up. The small room remained incredibly cold, and his thin layers were barely enough to keep him from freezing as he slowly drifted off. He dreamed that night of running across a snow-covered field as a child, building snowmen and rolling snowballs, but something felt slightly off about the memory. In his dreams, he was still completely alone, no classmates, no neighbors, and no parents around to scold him. Morning arrived in total silence, not a single city sound. No traffic, no neighbors, no insects, and no birds. He got up and opened the door. Outside lay the same endless white, with about 10 centimeters of fresh snow already, burying yesterday's hard work. But wait, a system message had popped up. Overnight, displaying a refreshed daily random task, and the system log showed it arrived. A single second after midnight, while he slept right through it with his volume turned down. It was now 5:30 in the morning, the sun not up yet but the sky already pale, though the system panel labeled it daytime. The task was a material search. ×3, currently sitting at 0 of 3, paying out 3 survival points and a Tier 1 survival pack on completion. Random tasks gave points, and this particular quest came with a pack, simple enough, except that absolutely everything outside was buried under thick ice and snow. But then he spotted a supply crate marker right outside his flimsy fence, making him think this system task was a bit too easy. He walked out, dug the crate free, dropped it into his inventory, and searched for more. Unbelievable, right? The system highlighted the targets, a feature he had almost forgot. Overnight, one sat right beyond the fence, and after walking about 10 meters, he located a second one under a dead tree caked in white. Since the sun was not up and he had not eaten yet, he made sure there were no other crates nearby and headed inside. First seemed normal enough. He sat on the floor, quietly chewing his bread and skimming the world chat. Plenty of people reported getting the exact same material search, just in different amounts, with the target count matching their crate. Total 1 crate for 1 point, all the way up to 5 crates for 5 points. The catch was the difference in luck. One player bragged his task was already finished because he tripped over a crate right outside his door, calling himself the absolute luckiest man alive. Right behind him, another player complained that he had been out for over an hour, shoveled every inch of snow near his house, and still could not find. His crate was hidden. More people piled on, agreeing that the crates were nearly impossible to find. The young man swallowed his bread with a gulp of water and let out a heavy sigh. Surely this many people were not conspiring to prank him. Seriously, could it be that the others genuinely could not see these target markers? He reading from the very start that they had to rely entirely on luck or physical searching. While he could walk straight to them, pure madness, he had no special deal with the system, so why would it hand him privileges? He called out every name he could think of: system, game master, administrator, admin, but got nothing back. Sitting there bewildered, he realized no one in that entire channel had mentioned a task marker, yet he had seen them since the very first minute. He felt no joy. Instead, a cold spike of panic hit. Being singled out in a survival game is rarely a good thing. After waiting around like a fool with no reply, he finished his bread, drank his water, shoved the anxiety aside, and opened the crates. He only had to find the materials, not carry the heavy crates back to complete the quest. The first supply crate gave him bread, water, and a severely worn axe. The second contained more bread and water, plus 3 pieces of low-grade wood. Both crates simply vanished once empty, bread and water were the standard default drops, but that worn axe and wood were the real prize. This low-grade wood was a clear step up from the inferior materials the first task handed him, and once he finished building that first fence, the leftover wood and nails and hammer simply vanished since they were task items. This low-grade wood was a white-quality item he had no idea how to use yet, so he pocketed it and headed out, carrying his severely worn axe, which the system panel rated as having a touch of strength. and sharpness, but why was its durability already down to half? Broken or not, the weight of it in his hand made his sense of safety surge. Out. On the snow, he kept watching for markers, staring down the dead trees. Scattered around him, after focusing on a tree for 3 seconds, a label surfaced. Calling it a logging resource, he realized the marker wasn't just some floating box icon, since this readout appeared on anything he focused on for more than 3 seconds. He tested the snow and got a depth of 70 centimeters. No resources, just a measurement. He dug down to the stone beneath his feet, stared at it and learned it was nothing but crushed rock, completely useless in this world's rules. Still, he pocketed a piece anyway, with no idea where he'd ever use. He kept circling the house. After more than half an hour, another supply crate marker appeared. Just as he moved to grab it, a red exclamation mark flared up right beside the crate inside a drift barely a meter away. He stared at that warning mark. Nothing had been there a moment ago, meaning there was no previous danger. It was his own approach that had woken whatever lay buried under the snow. Holding his gaze for a few seconds, a description bloomed. The system called it a snow lurker, a 4-legged beast that lived in the cold and hid well with sharp claws and teeth, but it added that thick, padded clothing would give this monster a great deal of trouble, so the hidden creature was likely too small to bite through cotton padding. At least, that was his guess. The supply crate was right there, and he didn't want to give it up after walking so far with no telling where the next one waited, as long as he kept it off his bare hands and face. There was no real danger. His grip tightened on the axe as he watched the spot and edged toward the crate. The red mark slid in response, looping around the crate to close in on his position. The snow surface betrayed nothing of how the beast moved beneath it. It stopped once. It had crept near him, lying completely still, waiting for him to approach. Without that prompt, he would never have known the danger existed. He scanned around for a spot where the snow ran only 10 centimeters deep, lifted his leg, and charged. It was just a few meters. He reached the spot and jumped, landing on a stone hidden under snow that came only to his ankles, axe ready to strike. He wanted to split it the second it surfaced. He braced as the red marker streaked toward him, and then the whole plan fell apart. The beast under the snow rushed him, missed the stone entirely, and slammed straight into it face first with a stunned little whimper. It wasn't knocked out, but the pathetic yelping left him standing there completely baffled. Honestly, was this creature here to bite him or just to make a fool of itself? For safety, he took out a wooden board rather than reaching in with his hand. Curious, he used the plank to scrape away the snow, unburying the day's 4-legged surprise that had crashed, scooped up onto the surface. It was a round, fluffy white ball. The creature had clearly cracked its head, leaving only a third of its health bar, and he honestly couldn't tell what it was, a snow fox or a ferret. When he's not sure, he waits for a prompt, so he stared at it, and after about 10 seconds the answer came. The system called it a level 1 snow fox cub, a hunter hidden in the snow, and flagged it as tameable. That tameable tag let his fingers loosen on the axe, though he didn't put the blade away, since there was no guarantee this little thing wouldn't take a parting shot when he got close. He told it not to bite him or he'd chop it to pieces. Stepping up to the badly hurt cub, he pinned its head lightly with the flat of the axe and grabbed it by the scruff under its terrified eyes. He had no idea if you were even supposed to hold a fox this way, but he'd watched cat owners do it as a kid and never saw anyone get bitten doing it. Carrying the little fox still crying its thin cry, he walked back to the supply crate, dug it out, packed it away, and hurried home. The task shined at 3 of 3. Complete, handing him 3 survival points and a level 1 survival gift package. That was his whole morning's luck. A head injury for the fox and a crate for him. In the yard, he set the little fox down outside the door and went in to crack the supply crate first. Seriously, who knows how to tame a wild fox anyway, so he figured he'd let it stay hungry until he found a method or something it could eat. And as for whether it might freeze out there, he honestly didn't know, but he couldn't let it get a free chance to ambush him. The crate gave him bread, water, and a frozen white chicken. He wondered whether foxes liked chicken as he looked at the frozen lump in his hand, and whether this was why the cub had been guarding that crate, this single ice-locked chicken sealed off behind it. Though he couldn't see how it would even smell it through that. The chicken was no small bird in any case. He tucked the bread and water away, dropped the white chicken into the electric pot, which weighed a good 5 or 6 pounds, poured in a bottle of water, and switched it on to cook. The water was nowhere Near enough, but the ice crusting the chicken melted as it warmed, and in under 10 minutes he had a pot of broth going. In the real world, he'd never cook a frozen bird like this, but his options were limited, and the ice layer over the chicken was clean and clear without a speck of grime, which made him feel all right about it. Half an hour and 6 points of house energy later, the smell of chicken soup finally drifted up out of the pot. Outside his door, the little fox that had gone quiet started up its thin whimpering and crying again. He asked if it was hungry as he opened the door to the cub, whose health bar still sat at a third, and crouched down to look at it. The little thing was honestly good looking, a fluffy white ball with a bushy tail and a pair of big ears now drooping limp against its head. It strained to lift that head, tears welling up, knowing full well that the meat it had smelled but never tasted had been carried off by this human. It had hurt itself trying to stop him from taking its food, and now it was too dizzy to even stand. He murmured that it must be feeling wronged and reached out to stroke its head, finding a purple bruise under the white fur. It had knocked off 2/3 of its own health in a single charge. This cub was fast and far too anxious for its own good. It shivered at the touch of his fingers, bracing for a second blow, but no pain. The blow never comes. After a wary glance up at Yaben, the tiny beast tilts its dizzy little head several times before leaning its entire weight straight into her palm. She tells the creature it is well behaved and offers it a home, warning that meat won't be on every menu, but it definitely won't starve. She can't understand a word it squeaks back, but a cub burrowing into her hand means it has officially decided to trust her. With the little white ball no longer resisting, Yaben counts the taming as a success, brings it inside, and pulls a basket off the shelf to tuck the injured creature in. The cozy warmth of the room and the rich scent of chicken soup completely settles the cub, and it rests quietly, just waiting to get its strength back for some real meat. Yaben now watch as she pulls up her status panel and spots a change. The system still tags her as Yaben from Snow Mountain, race human, but where her talent once read none, it now reads see-through. Her health is up to 72, stamina to 77, energy to 84, and her combat power is still a flat, pathetic 3. Her equipment section shows the warm 5-piece set with its warmth, defense, and speed bonuses, but her pet slot is still completely empty. Her inventory is half full of bread, water, primary wood, a severely worn axe, and a first-grade survival gift package. Her survival points sit at 14. That empty pet slot confirms the taming hasn't actually stuck, even as her fingers keep stroking the cub in its basket. Pets have to be raised slowly, she reminds herself, and once they grow used to you, they're yours. Her real attention is locked on that talent line, which didn't show up at the start and is only now visible see-through. This must be the skill letting her read all these helpful hints, though she can't see why they named it see-through instead of something obvious like information. The cub whimpers softly when her fingers still a curious little cry. It isn't fully tamed yet, just unable to move with its aching head, and still half certain she might decide to kill it. So it lies there quietly, studying her face and hands. She tells it to wait a little longer, explaining that the chicken soup needs more time to simmer before the flavor really opens up. If it isn't tamed yet, she will take it slow, since it is being sensible enough for now. Then Yaben opens the house panel to check the upkeep. The energy bar is still ticking down because her electric pot is simmering, draining 0.2 of a point every minute. After half an hour, it drains close to 10 points, converting to a single survival point, completely acceptable since she won't be cooking every day. Next, she opens the survival gift package, and the first-grade box holds only medicine, 2 first-grade blood replenishment pills, 2 first-grade spirit replenishment pills, and 2 first-grade pet love pills. The red blood pill handles blood loss, anemia, and the restoring crucial vitality for both humans and pets. The blue spirit pill restores mental power for listlessness or an unsteady will, and the colorful love pill boosts a pet's mood, with a chance to increase loyalty and a small chance to clear negative status effects. All 3 feel suspiciously tailored to the snow fox cub resting in her basket, but she won't be handing them over just yet. Though it isn't her pet yet, and if she heals it, the little beast might tear her house apart or simply bolt. She would rather it stay a bit weak and lie quietly right where it is. Suddenly, the cub catches a whiff of something far more fragrant than the meat it just missed, but before it could even lift its head to look, the scent was gone. He asked if it smelled that and kept stroking the little beast with the exact finger that had just held the love pill. Sure enough, the little fox started rubbing against his hand to please him, gripping his fingers with its tiny front paws and sniffing the lingering trace, confirming that this hand had held that mysterious scent. It loved the smell without knowing what it actually was, and now it was certain he had stolen from it once again. The whole speech he had just given sailed right past the cub, which understood no human words at all. In its little head, this human had stolen its things twice over and could not be allowed to escape. He told the beast it was quite clever, but since it was not his yet, he could not feed it the pill, he found. To be fair, the cub's begging is pretty impressive, turning on the charm the second it wanted food. Didn't matter if it was not his, it simply did not eat, period. No amount of absolute cuteness would change that rule. The cub did not understand any of this, but seeing him shake his head, it let go of his hand and slumped, looking deeply wronged. Having checked all his possessions, he packed them away and checked the cooking pot, lifting the lid, flooded his tiny room with the rich aroma of chicken soup. The place was too small for a table, so in his past life, he would drag a box over to eat. Now he did not even have those basic things, since the starting clothes he wore had refreshed and simply vanished the exact moment he took them off. Making do, he laid 3 wooden boards from his inventory across the floor. To protect it, simple as that, ready to serve up his hot meal. He ladled out a chicken leg, a wing, and half a bowl of broth, setting it all down. Instantly, the little cub in the basket went wild at the smell. Crying nonstop, the little guy wouldn't calm down until he sat nearby. The soup was too hot to feed it and too hot for him to drink, but this broth cost nearly 10 points of house reserve to make, proving to be more than a basic meal. The system officially rated it as a green tier, simmered plain chicken soup, granting a primary recovery effect that raised his healing by 5% for 10 minutes. Simmering simple white quality chicken for 50 minutes had yielded a green quality meal with that 5% boost, and he had no clue if that was good or just pathetic. When he thought about selling it on the market for points, it suddenly lost all its charm. The absolute best food listed at the moment was a blue tier fruit called blue crystal grape, which when eaten granted a special blessing that boosted speed by 5 points for 30 minutes. He pulled up his personal screen to check his base attribute stats, looking past his combat power to find strength and spirit at 3, speed at 3+1, defense at 2+2, comprehension at 3, and luck totally hidden, 6 basic stats, and none higher than 3 without gear. The overall average was under 3.5, keeping his combat power stuck at 3. Talk about a reality check. One piece of fruit makes him look slower than a literal grape, which instantly ruined any excitement over his homemade chicken soup. A 5% recovery boost meant absolutely nothing when his base stats were this pitiful. Just look at the weak cub still resting in its basket for hours. Still short of half its health, he was literally outstatted by a grape. Just great. The little fox stared unblinkingly at the soup as he spooned some into a bowl. Cue the anxious crying. He explained that this bowl was not for it, promising a small dish instead so it wouldn't scald. Otherwise, it would get scalded. He had worked too hard saving its life. The creature now, giving medicine was impossible, but sharing some food was fair. A bite of food seemed fair, since following him meant eating together. He poured a thin, fast-cooling layer of broth and lifted the cub. The moment its paws touched the floor, it rushed over to eagerly lick. Even with its head throbbing, the fragrant broth brought instant joy. He urged it to drink the liquid first. The meat was hot. One bad bite could scald it. He sipped his own food slowly. Seeing the cub finish and wait, he poured just a bit more. Once the meat cooled, he chose the chicken head for the dish. Since the cub refused to call him master, no prime cuts were allowed. It went straight for the comb, biting off half in one go. The sudden heat made it slow down, chewing and swallowing hard. It let out an excited squeak, then ground through the bone. That skull was half the size of his fist, bone and all. He finally understood the power of those teeth. He even tried biting a leg bone to compare, knowing the hardness difference. It was shocking. He had completely underestimated this little beast from the start. Just because it bumped its head on a rock, dumb mistake. Now full and happy, the little cub whimpered softly before curling into a tight ball. Paws over its head, it dozed off. He told it to sleep. He promised to bring it along later this afternoon, gently lifting the cub. Back into the basket it went, receiving a few soothing pats to calm down. Then he finished his own meal, leg, wing, and broth left him stuffed. He felt incredibly lazy, but he still had to head out into the wild. His daily chores were finished, but extra supply crates were always worth finding. If nothing else, he could chop trees. He put the dishes away. He covered the hot pot, completely unwilling to leave the sleeping cub alone. So he grabbed the entire plastic basket. He opened the door. The moment he stepped outside, the basket vanished. The cub plummeted. He gasped. He almost killed it and snatched it from the air. The sleeping creature was safe, its health still critically low. What a relief. He carefully tucked the cub into his huge, padded jacket pocket. Both pockets were massive, easily holding 4 or 5 water bottles. Opening the door again, he saw the basket sitting right inside. Suddenly, he understood. Everything in his house was a temporary simulation. None of these items were physical. Only earned gear could leave. Only actual earned gear, like his axe and wooden planks, could pass through. Looking at his familiar furniture, he realized something. One day, once he built a real home, this entire replica would vanish. The system had simply copied his old apartment to keep him sane. Maybe it was a threat of comfort in those harsh early days, or just to keep them from freezing to death with nowhere to sleep. He stepped outside with a heavy heart. Determined to search the frozen outskirts for supply crates, he had brought the cub back home around 7 that morning, after cooking soup and eating 2 hours just vanished. Not even 10 a.m. yet. He scouted around, constantly keeping an eye on his cabin's direction so he would not get lost. In the whiteout, slowly the terrain grew familiar, and by noon he spotted another supply crate. Beside it lay something highly unusual, a tiny splash of green in all that blinding white. He stared closely, and the system identified it as a dying seedling. A frozen seed, buried for years, had miraculously sprouted under the snow, but it simply could not survive this brutal cold. He scouted the area first to make sure no monsters were lurking, then cleared the snow with a wooden plank. He gently scooped the tiny sprouted seedling out of the frozen ground. The system called it a green tier seedling, plantable, but no other info. Extra information about what it might become. Still, in this endless world of white, let's be honest, planting a tree in this snowy void felt like a massive win. Because staring at endless snow all day was driving him half blind. He pocketed the seedling. Checking his inventory, he had only 2 empty slots left. But he still decided to crack open the newly found crate. Identical items could stack up, but crates did not. This one rewarded him with bread, water, and 5 cabbage seeds. He found it odd that the system counted seeds individually, wondering if he could harvest them and eventually grow an infinite supply. Sadly, the system was not about to let him break the game. The system labeled them low tier, single-use only plantable in soft soil. Seeing that single-use label brought back old memories of working on his parents' farm as a kid. He used to complain constantly about genetically modified seeds. Back then, farmers would keep their own seeds to plant for the following season, but gradually things changed, he remembered, when even the most basic grain seeds were turned into single-use products. From then on, everyone had to buy them from a commercial supplier every single season, because replanting their own harvest resulted in sterile sprouts that quickly withered and died. A wave of pure nostalgia hit him. Still, he shook it off. He packed the seeds away. There was no time to sit around and wallow. Deep inside his pocket, the little cub woke up in a tight, warm space, wiggling around before poking its tiny head out to explore. Though still weak, its headache had finally faded, realizing it was snuggled inside this human's warm coat. The beast looked up at him with deep confusion in its eyes. It had no memory of parents. It had struggled alone in the frozen wastes ever since. It was born barely surviving off scraps it could protect, and yet primal instincts remained. It knew that when a cub was freezing, a parent would wrap them up tight with their own body to keep them safe. The cub stared at him with a gentle, heavy sadness, then retreated back into the cozy pocket. In its mind, the creature decided this human was a different beast entirely, someone who had lost his own child and needed a replacement. So before he could even realize it, the cub decided to claim this warm spot forever. Absorbing all the warmth it could, he stared down at his right pocket, trying to read whatever was going on inside those tiny eyes, and the pet panel immediately answered his doubts. It listed the pet as a level 1 snow fox cub, loyalty 51. Combat power 3, seriously injured but recovering. He honestly could not understand why the cub had suddenly accepted him as master. Maybe it had seen them out in the freezing snow and panicked that he had abandoned it, so it had rushed to claim him, staying balled up inside his pocket, soft coaxing clearly. Was not the trigger, and a proper threat might teach it who to respect. Whatever the reason, the creature was his now. He just had to get it healthy while raising its loyalty fast. He told it to eat the pill before going to sleep since it had wanted the treat earlier. He pulled out a pet love pill and held it right above the pocket. Right on cue, the cub poked its head out at the sweet scent. Its pink nose rubbed his hand, while tiny paws hooked the pocket edge as it carefully opened its mouth to swallow the pill. The system soon reported that his pet had eaten a first-grade love pill, restoring 20% health and gaining 3 loyalty, bringing its total happiness to 80 out of 100. Its half-empty health bar jumped a good chunk and loyalty climbed 3 points. Since it had not been in a bad mood after claiming him, the happiness boost did not show much yet. He told the cub to go back to sleep, patting its head and promising not to leave it. Outside, nestled in the warm fur, listening to his footsteps, the cub grew even surer of its theory that he had gone out searching for medicine to heal its painful injuries, and that he had withheld the good stuff earlier not out of stinginess, but for some special reason that required waiting until now. The system panel told him his pet understood his hard work, adding 2 more loyalty. He stopped dead, staring at his pocket. He was baffled. Understood his hard work. How? It had decided that finding food in the snow was too brutal, and since he had not dragged it out to work, it owed him loyalty for the mercy. Something felt off about the whole thing, but a fox could not grasp human speech, and he could not grasp fox language. No amount of pondering was going to hand him a clear answer. This pet has more inner drama than a soap opera, he thought. He set his guesses aside and got back to work, spotting another supply crate just ahead. The afternoon wore on, and he made it home before dark with 4 more crates found, axe in hand, and his inventory completely full. 10 of 10 slots held bread, water, primary wood, cabbage seeds, tomato seeds, the pine sapling, eggs, and 2 blood replenishment pills, 2 spirit pills, and a dressed chicken. On top of his earlier haul, he had opened another massive frozen dressed chicken, 2 tomato seeds, and 3 unhatchable eggs. Once his inventory filled, he fed the cub the second love pill, which practically topped off its health bar and nudged its loyalty score to 62. Standing in his own yard now, he reheated some chicken soup that had gone cold. It had not snowed during the day, but the regional wind had carried snow over the fence, settling across his yard in a fresh layer. After clearing it once, he looked at the task notice popping up again and worked hard to tell himself not to be surprised. The system rewarded him with a single survival point. Clean the courtyard before dark, get rewarded. Worded a bit differently from yesterday, but it meant the same thing. A clean yard earned a. Once they made it home, the little cub woke up, clutching the edge of his pocket with tiny paws. It poked its head out to explore, and noticing they had finally stopped, it looked straight up. The tiny thing let out a soft, spoiled cry that immediately brought a smile to Yikayan's face. He promised the little creature they would eat soon, but first, he needed his tools. Gently scooping the cub into his palm, he carried it inside the warm house. The warmth hit them, and the second its paws touched the floor, the cub began exploring. But by the time Yikayan finished washing up, the curious little thing had already lost interest. It sat quietly by the bed, staring with round, wide eyes at the steaming pot. Yikayan chuckled and told it there was no rush. It could eat once the food cooled down. Switching off the electric pot, he scooped the remaining chicken and broth into a basin. He figured it would take at least 10 minutes to cool, feeling exhausted after a long day. He picked up the cub, placed it gently next to his pillow, and lay down to rest. He pulled up the chat channel to see what the other players were talking about. Everyone was discussing a survival mall that apparently unlocked at 20 survival points. Yikayan's score sat at 15, and he doubted he could gather enough by tomorrow. Honestly, finding a virtual shopping mall in a game world was not a big shocker. Being terrible at socializing, his strategy was simple: just lurk and stay quiet. He preferred to watch silently, but anyone posting in the channel displayed their ID. Those identity numbers could be added as friends or marked under a special watch list. Once marked, a player could search through every single message that person had sent. It was a creepy feature that made his skin crawl just imagining being watched like that. While he valued his isolation, others clearly preferred huddling together for warmth. Even with scammers lurking, people kept trying to build fragile little group organizations. Even this early, factions were forming. One player was putting out a major recruiting pitch for a boxing gym, seeking anyone with a high combat power. Above 5 to add him, he promised partners who would train in martial arts to strengthen their bodies, warning that the weak were simply untrainable. He remembered that handle, marked it as a special focus right away, and searched back, he was the same self-proclaimed provincial martial arts champion. From the combat power debate the night before, but looking over his messages, Ikayan quickly lost all interest. The guy sounded exactly like those old hollow recruiters from his old job hunting days, preaching about teamwork and the grand plans they had laid. He babbled about working hard and suffering together. Now, as an investment in a brighter future, he talked about trading a small present sacrifice for a vast tomorrow. Once added as a friend, players could send designated items over, which was how he would funnel their points directly into his own pockets. A single transfer cost 1 or 2 points, making the recruiter a fortune. Opening the trade channel, Ikayan saw bread going at 10 loaves for a single survival point. Meanwhile, someone reported that these martial arts crews demanded 2 to 5 points for a single loaf, or water bottle, trading a private martial arts guide in return. He could not. Some called it flat out worthless, and learning martial arts from text was hard to swallow. He had no desire to give the swelling crowd of recruiting masters any more attention. So he simply shut his screen, turning away from their endless messages. He tilted his head toward the little cub resting by his pillow, making a decision. Naming things is definitely not his strong suit. He tries calling the cub Little By twice, but the little creature flatly ignores him. He cycles through Little Snow, Little Fox, and even Little Lee. None of them stick until he finally tries Light Snow, named after. He based her name on a fluffy virtual pet he once raised in a game. The cub has no idea what he is saying. She just watches him. When he finally stops talking, she lifts her head. Time to eat, obviously. Taking that loud cry as a stamp of approval, he accepts the new name. Gently patting her head, he is relieved the naming process is finally done. He serves up the soup and offers Light Snow a wing, then some chicken breast. Rejecting the breast meat, she forces him to offer a chicken neck instead. To drill it in, he makes a point of calling her name first. By the time she collapses by the bed, she is already used to it. He tells Light Snow that it is time to rest before tomorrow's busy scavenger hunt. Stuffed in content, she rests while he cleans all the dirty pots and bowls. After finishing up, he takes a quick bath and lies down to sleep. Seeing her curled up right by his pillow, he leaves his hat on so she stays a touch warmer. Once he drifts off, she quietly creeps out and gets extremely cozy. Light Snow pads over to his side and presses tightly against his shoulder. Her soft fur is warm, but in her little mind, he is helpless. This silly human simply doesn't know how to raise a cub properly, totally hopeless. Waking up the next morning to the feeling of a warm, fluffy ball right at his neck, he totally freezes. Then he remembers the cub has grown incredibly clingy since claiming him. He whispers a soft good morning and tells her to stretch those tiny legs. Since there is leftover soup, he gets straight up and washes his face. Turning on the electric pot, he adds water to reheat the broth. 3 eggs will go in later to make a truly hearty breakfast. Light Snow stands by, watching the magical cooking pot work its magic. Shaking her head happily, she uses her tiny paw to open the door. She dashes out after him while he grabs the shovel for the snow. Darting around, she climbs the crooked fence and begins running happy laps. He checks his system screen, same old task of gathering supply crates. Today's target is 5 crates, which will grant him 5 survival points. Calling out for her to be careful, he keeps his shovel away. The little fox is having a blast, darting wildly across the yard. Hearing her name, she leaps off the fence and launches herself forward. Dropping his shovel, he warns her to be careful and catches the flying white ball. It is crazy how much energy she has now that she is healed. Just yesterday she was badly hurt, and he was deeply worried about her. Now she is already hurling herself across the yard like a tiny bullet. Caught safely in his arms, she isn't scared at all. She hugs his fingers with her front paws, rubbing against them happily. He tells her to take a rest and stay inside his pocket. Gently stuffing the clingy cub inside, he gets back to his shoveling. A clean courtyard is always nice, even if it doesn't give rewards. Snuggled up in his warm pocket, Light Snow is already drifting to sleep. She rolled around happily, certain that as long as she took the initiative, this human would take care of her. What a pity they weren't the same species, she thought. She wished she could be his real cub. At that moment, his panels showed her affection rose by 2, though her joy dropped by 3, making him pause his snow sweeping in total confusion. Before continuing, he figured his little pet simply had a highly dramatic inner life and he'd just have to get used to her drama. Checking the yard yielded no special rewards, so he dropped the search and went inside to eat breakfast with the cub. Before heading out, he cleared his inventory, eating some eggs for breakfast, and tossed the frozen dressed chicken straight into the pot. He hadn't cooked it yet, but thawing ingredients seemed to count as standard use, since once food went into the cookware, that annoying refresh countdown completely disappeared. Seeds and saplings were different, still flashing a 3-hour refresh countdown timer, even sitting in a basket, meaning they had to stay in his inventory, leaving him wishing for a proper storage warehouse since the current setup was incredibly annoying. Then his daily random quest popped up, a resource search 0 out of 5, offering 5 survival points and a level 1 survival gift pack, with the only difference being the points reward this time. Walking out of his fenced courtyard, he spotted a supply crate barely 12 meters away, walked over, picked it up, and opened it immediately. It gave him bread, fresh water, and 5 basic wood planks, which he quickly stowed. Then Lightsna poked her head out of his pocket, clawed his coat, and climbed up onto his shoulder. Crouching there to keep him company, he gently asked the fluffy white ball if she was done sleeping. Her trust had already hit 69. Because beyond those 2 love pills, her loyalty kept naturally ticking up on its own. Backed by a ridiculously dramatic mind, she let out 2 tiny cries and lay across his shoulder, telling him they could leave. In her head, this human had a tough life, hunting for food at dawn with endless chores waiting at home. Since she couldn't help inside, she decided she would watch their surroundings extremely closely, ensuring no wild beast could sneak up on him in the snow. He smiled, told her they were moving, and set off in a great mood, amused by the way she raised her paws and shook her ears, while his happy smile nudged her mood up a few points. He worked through the white world in fits and starts, covering the entire region he had explored the previous day. By the end of the morning, finding 5 supply crates, he completed his daily quest, which rewarded him with 5 survival points and a nice gift pack. With those points secured, the system announced that the survival point mall had finally opened. His points having cleared the minimum spending threshold, he quickly switched on the electric pot to stew the chicken once more, and presumably because the bird was high quality, it tasted absolutely amazing even without salt. Sitting by the bed, he opened the survival mall to see what his 2 points could buy. What came up was a planting trio, a semi-finished workbench, and a newbie choice survival set, all priced at exactly 2 points each. Anything he couldn't afford wasn't displayed at all, keeping it completely hidden, and it wasn't the massive store he had pictured, just those 3 things players wouldn't normally find inside supply crates, with seeds and saplings taking up 3 of his inventory slots. He quickly bought the planting trio outright, and his only 2 points were gone instantly. It wasn't a loss, though. Seeds planted and grown over time would yield a much greater harvest. He told Lightsnow they would dig a hole to plant a tree, scooping the little cub from where she crouched and back into his pocket to stop her staring at the pot. 50 minutes of stewing remained, which would only tire her out. Still, she poked her head out, eyeing his hand with a curious tilt. He explained these were planting tools: an iron pickaxe, a shovel, and a hoe. He pointed to each, giving the little one a serious introduction, even knowing she couldn't understand a single word. Using the iron pickaxe, he dug a hole near the courtyard gate and pulled out the pine sapling, setting it in and shoveling soil over its roots. The system immediately rolled out a long, dramatic message about finding a rare sapling in this frozen world of snow, how he had planted it and made it survive, and how every tree in this white world would bring surprises. Then handed him 5 whole survival points. All that fancy text aside, his focus landed squarely on those 5 points for a single planted tree. Now that really was a shock. It made him wonder, would planting vegetables pay out too? The same way, the soup still had quite a while to stew, so he kept working the frozen ground, since once the soil was soft enough he could get his vegetables in too. Finally, after all that endless digging, the little patch in front of him finally reached that soft state. He dug a hole, dropped The seeds watered them and covered them with a thin layer of soil, exactly as the system instructed. Next, he pulled out 2 tomato seeds, placing them half a meter apart before planting the cabbage seeds at roughly the same spacing. 5 seeds in the ground gave him a tiny garden patch in the corner of the yard. After he stared at it for a moment, the system relabeled the strip as unsprouted land, half a meter wide and 3 meters long. Light Snow nuzzled his face and lifted a tiny paw toward the house, the smell of cooking soup reaching her first. He told her they were going back to start lunch, checking the time on the way inside, breaking that frozen ground had been exhausting work, taking over half an hour for that small strip. Alone, when he opened the door, the cabin was already filled with a delicious aroma. Light Snow bounded straight onto the bed and lay there politely, waiting for him to tell her she could eat, because in her mind her human would never let her starve. Any delay simply meant she had to wait a bit longer. He washed up, turned off the power and got lunch ready. 1 human and 1 fox cub split half a chicken and some soup between them, then headed back outside without resting. Before leaving, he checked the garden patch. The buried seeds still had not sprouted, and there was no countdown showing on them yet. The pine sapling, however, had clearly grown about 3 centimeters taller after a closer look, even if that still left it no higher than his calf. He reminded himself this was not the real world, and the speed of that sapling told him the vegetables he had just planted would be ready to cook before long. Light Snow suddenly stood up on his shoulder, raised a paw and pointed off to the right toward an uphill stretch he hadn't explored yet. He asked her what was over there, but she only answered with a string of soft cries and wobbly gestures, frustrated that he couldn't make sense of any of it, whether she was angry at him or just frustrated with herself. She gave up, leaped off his shoulder, and bolted in that direction. He hurried after her, newly convinced that a tiny fox cub was simply faster than him. 10 minutes of walking brought him to whatever she had been chasing, and it turned out to be a supply crate, a green quality one at that. He cleared the snow off it and, under her expectant little gaze, dropped the whole crate straight into his inventory unopened. Opening it right away would let things stack, but a green crate would never yield the same as a white one, and if it broke into several different items, he would regret cracking it before he had the space. So he scooped Light Snow up and praised her for being an absolute star, set her on his shoulder, and kept searching nearby for anything else worth grabbing. Not far off, he found another pine sapling and for the first time picked up an item that should have been the least scarce thing in this frozen world, an actual ice block. Honestly, he was just completely dumbfounded. The entire ground is made of ice, yet this weird system decides to drop a separate ice block as a white quality item. Go figure, right? It was somehow different from the ice underfoot, so he stashed it away for later, and with that, his inventory, which had some empty slots when he set out, was full again. He told Light Snow they were heading home to plant the tree first, and she crawled obediently back into his pocket. Indifferent to where he was carrying her, back in the yard, he picked up the farm tools and dug another hole for the new sapling. The moment he planted it, the system notified him he had planted his second tree, and his greening value had reached 10 points, earning him 10 survival points for it. Curious, he opened a menu and found his shelter really did have a new stat now. Greening, the system explained, brought vitality to the place, and the higher the value climbed, the faster anything he planted would grow. He hadn't expected the trees to feed into a growth rate mechanic at all, though with the planted seeds still dormant, 2 trees probably wouldn't make much difference yet. What made him happiest was those survival points, 15 now, just 5 short of being able to buy something new from the survival mall. He still didn't know what those semi-finished products were for, but he was sure they would be necessary. Eventually, he told Light Snow to eat her 2 love pills since they wouldn't be hunting crates that afternoon. Her master was going to chop trees. His inventory was tight, so he opened the noon survival pack, which still held 2 each of the 3 medicines, the blood replenishment pill and the spirit replenishing pills, stacked neatly, but the love pills went straight to the cub. Both at once, she gobbled them down and rolled around in his palm before he tucked her back into his pocket. Then, the system announced those love pills raised her loyalty by 6 and her joy by 28, which actually maxed her out completely. It hit maximum, boosting her growth speed by a full 100%. Her stats sat at 75 now, 25 from the cap, making him wonder if maxing it might unlock a special evolution for her, or even the ability to understand human speech. His axe slammed down on the dead tree, starting the harvest. Pings, he got mostly white-quality primary wood with the occasional gray inferior wood mixed through. Once a tree was fully chopped, it vanished in front of him, leaving a scatter of materials on the ground to collect. This time he got another batch of ice blocks and some pine needles. The system listed the needles as a white-quality material that dropped randomly while chopping pine, having no clear use yet. His inventory was too small to keep hoarding the stuff. Once he got home, he sat down and opened the trading interface to offload what he did not need. People were posting requests for exactly these items, and the prices were not bad at all. 1 survival point for 5 ice blocks, 1 for 20 wood boards. He switched to the consignment listings to gauge the going rate. Someone had 4 ice blocks up for a single survival point, and the listing vanished before he could even finish reading it. Further down, the 3-for-1 listings were much thinner. Only a dozen or so, and those too were getting snapped up quite often. Staring at his meager 15 points, he decided selling was the smarter play, so he listed his 6 ice blocks for 2. He kept the wood since he figured he would need it himself, and it stacked anyway, but the gray inferior wood was too poor to sell, so he carried it out to the yard to fence off his vegetable patch. The ice blocks sold the instant he finished the barrier, and the needles went right after. 4 points credited to his account, followed at once by a buyer message, so buyers could message sellers. This was his first trade, and he had not figured out the etiquette yet, so he opened the interface to read it. A player calling himself Grassland had written to ask if he would add him as a friend, saying he was out of survival points but had other tradable goods on hand, hoping they could swap items down the line. The listings never revealed the actual numbers behind a trade, so he could not be sure he actually bought those ice blocks. Adding him as a friend or leaving a message that exposed his own details was the only way for either of them to see the others' information. When he clicked through to view his profile, 2 things stood out: his race, human clan, and his combat power, which read 9, unbelievably high for this region. The highest combat power he had seen anywhere in the snow mountain regions. Chatter, he wondered whether a man like that was really adding him just to trade for ice blocks, but a glance at his own combat power, still stuck at 3, reassured him he had nothing worth scamming out of him, so he clicked accept and sent back a simple hello. He answered the moment they connected. Greeting his new friend from Snow Mountain, he told him straight that he had no ice blocks at the moment, that they dropped when chopping trees, and that he no longer had an axe to chop with. If that made him think he was a liar, so be it. But he was not lying about anything, just stating facts. He replied a beat slower, noting that axes were for sale on the trading interface, though he could not tell whether he had actually gone digging through the channel to find one. He told him he had already seen it. 18 survival points for an axe with 100. Durability would only last for 5 to 7 trees, with each tree yielding 3 to 5 ice blocks. Taking the average, 24 blocks would only fetch around 8 points, leaving him with a 10-point loss. The buyer replied instantly, insisting there had to be other drops, otherwise those expensive axes wouldn't sell. Even so, the guy sounded pretty doubtful. Our protagonist told him straight up that even at break-even prices, he was too broke to afford one. Honestly, he only added him out of curiosity over his high combat power of 9. The trader understood, telling him to reach out whenever he had more ice blocks to sell. Both of them were completely out of points. With that, the guy logged off to go dig for coal. Digging coal, he sat there scratching his head, utterly confused about what coal had to do with buying ice blocks, but he decided not to pry. Instead, he grabbed his worn axe with 32 durability left and went back outside. Targeting the dead tree past his yard, a fierce chopping session yielded 25 primary wood, 4 inferior wood, 4 ice blocks, and 8 pine needles, but there was a catch. The rare materials only dropped after the tree fully dissolved, since he had no replacement axe and only 12 durability left. Chopping another tree was impossible. So he quickly listed the ice blocks and pine needles to keep some points coming. As evening approached, he decided to split the listing prices for a quick sale. 4 blocks for 2 points and 8 needles for 3. Would they actually sell? That was anyone's guess, but he could always adjust the prices tomorrow morning. Surprisingly, these survival resources were produced during the day and snapped up at night for crafting or cooling. The demand never really dried up. before total darkness set in. He swept the entire yard clean, and the system rewarded his hard work with a single survival point. Apparently, keeping a clean home always paid off. Adding the 4 points from earlier sales, his total reached 19, just short of the crafting station, especially since he had no remaining quests to close the gap. Giving up for now, he woke up his sleeping pet cub Lightsnow for dinner. Together, master and pet filled their bellies before settling down. Outside, the sky darkened. Even though the endless white snow never truly turned pitch black, still, night meant it was time for sleep. Before drifting off, he checked the lively world chat. Complete strangers were busy hurling insults at each other on behalf of random made-up factions. He could only chuckle, wondering if that counted as true team spirit. The next morning greeted him with 2 very pleasant sales notifications. Market prices had surged overnight, matching his predictions perfectly. He had no regrets about selling early anyway. In this place, overthinking things never paid off. The real problem was that if he noticed this nighttime price hike, others surely had as well. There was no guarantee these night premium prices would last forever. Right then, a newly awake Lightsnow nuzzled his hand, earning a warm morning scratch. Rolling out of bed, he heated up the remaining soup in his trusty electric cooker, soaking a piece of plain bread for his pet. The bread tasted faintly of raw grain, edible, but nothing to write home about. Once their bellies were full, he performed his habitual morning sweep of the yard. Suddenly, his eyes fell on the green supply crate still sitting in his inventory. With all the planting, selling, and logging he did yesterday, he had completely forgotten this little prize even existed. Sitting back, he prepared to open it. He knelt on the floor to open it, finding green quality chests far better than the white ones. This green tier beat the white one in both quantity and grade, giving him 10 pieces of low-grade wood, 10 low-grade cloths, and a worn axe. The food was standard, so he stashed them. The timber stacked up, but he had no use for the cloth yet. It was coarse material, a single square meter in size, which he tried using as a bedsheet, but the system timer kept ticking and refused to accept it. Still, the worn axe he got was definitely better than his broken starting tool. This one had 80 durability, compared to the measly 50 on his old one. Having some spare currency on hand, he decided to purchase a semi-finished crafting table from the survival mall just in case. It cost 24 points. This dropped him to just 4. Unfortunately, the table was way too big for his shelter, measuring 3 meters long and 2 wide. He had to put it in the yard where it took up most of his tiny, cramped outdoor space. Lightsnow perched on his shoulder, staring warily at this giant lump of metal and wondering it came from. He gently patted her, reassuring her that there was nothing to fear. Then stood right in front of the machine and pulled up his crafting options. The massive blue list went on for pages, making his head spin instantly. Luckily, he only had the stuff for the first few blueprints, 6 of those options were basic house parts made entirely out of low-grade wood, like a wall, some boards, doors, windows, roof ridges, and tiles. The only other material he had was low-grade fabric, which still did not seem to have any real function. He shoved the cloth away, focusing on making an actual shelter to live in. The system broke down the exact requirements for every single structural piece. A wall cost 5 low-grade wood, a board took 4, and a door required 6. Roof ridges were 6, and tiles cost 1. He did some quick mental math, but his 71 timber was nowhere near enough, even for a tiny cabin with walls 5 meters wide. He would need 20 walls and 100 wood for the frame. The floor and ceiling required 50 boards, costing another 200 wood, plus a few windows and a door for 14 more. Thus, a 25 square meter cabin required over 314 wood before building the roof. He sighed to Lightsnow, admitting they were completely broke. She just stared back. No use crying over empty pockets. It was time to go out and chop. His daily quest was simple: locate 3 supply crates in the wild, so he grabbed Lightsnow, grabbed one box right outside his door, and easily found the others. The reward pack gave him 2 of each of the 3 medicines again, so he gave Lightsnow the love pill and started chopping immediately. Yesterday's chopped trees were gone. The stumps had cleared, so he decided not to venture too far, focusing on the dead trees nearby, ice blocks and pine needles sold steadily at 3 for 1 point, and he immediately listed them. As he found them, keeping the timber, his old, worn axe broke on the first tree, but his new axe chopped much faster. Each dead tree yielded between 20 and 28 wood, averaging 25, requiring 10 more trees to complete the cabin. Obviously, a single tool would not survive this grueling task. So he purchased a brand new 100 durability axe using the points he had banked. Luckily, constant sales of ice and pine needles kept his pockets full. Just enough to manage before his worn-out axe gave way. Starting at 6 in the morning, he chopped relentlessly until noon, and by the time the 10th tree fell, his bag held 334 basic wood and 121 inferior. Back home, he let the sleeping cub rest undisturbed in his pocket and approached the crafting table alone, processing the structural parts in the exact order he had meticulously planned. Each standard piece took roughly a single minute, but the collective crafting queue would run well over an hour. Suddenly at noon, a warning message popped, his whole screen flashing red. The system announced that 72 hours had passed in this survival game, and the safety countdown for their beginner shelters was already ticking down, meaning everyone had to build a real house as quickly as possible. He slowly turned to look at his fragile little wooden cabin, the one place that had offered absolute safety since day one, and saw a countdown flickering right above it. 11 hours left, the seconds already ticking past 40 before he could even process the text. The public chat erupted with pure panic. One guy screamed this would kill him, while others demanded answers. Why would the system delete their shelters overnight and leave them to freeze to death on a freezing mountain without warning? A third player asked bitterly if this was a true survival game or a funeral shroud disguised as one, confessing he had absolutely no idea how to build a shelter. Extreme panic filled the chat, a wall of panicked users screaming they had zero building skills whatsoever. But this brutal winter world was not going to show any mercy. Soon, someone intervened to explain that 20 survival points could buy a basic crafting station where players could feed raw timber to process individual building components, and then assemble their cabin like a jigsaw puzzle. The guide was incredibly thorough, yet changed nothing. Desperate players kept weeping, the vast majority crying they possessed zero survival points, having already blown their initial 10 on meager food and water, or paying for the heating energy to survive the bitter freeze. He knew that a shelter, even a tiny matchbox, was his absolute priority. Checking the remaining construction timer, he grabbed a piece of bread and headed back to the dead woods. Chewing as he walked, he realized raw timber prices would skyrocket very soon, and besides, he still needed logs for the roof ridge and tiles, or the nightly snow would easily collapse his ceiling. He felled another tree, and before he could even gather the fallen ice and pine needles, an unusual notification popped up. A tiny sapling had dropped right beside the timber. The system labeled it a mysterious plant of unknown rank, revealing its secrets only after being properly planted. He tucked the rare item away, highly intrigued, and quickly made his way back to the yard to begin building. Along the path, he glanced at the public chat, again observing the same frantic players screaming into the void, and realized they were just wasting their remaining precious seconds. But honestly, out here, hesitation is a death sentence. Comfort was a luxury he simply could not afford when basic survival was not guaranteed. But apparently others disagreed, preferring to freeze in the dark rather than swing in axe. One particularly loud guy boasted about being a wealthy heir, accustomed to luxury cars and private estates, the type whose family worried if he walked even a few extra paces. Because of that, he refused to endure any manual labor in this frozen wilderness, claiming that suffering would somehow betray his family's love. Others similarly styled themselves as pampered royals, the delicate treasures of their wealthy households. Even the spoiled little brats their parents bowed to, hearing their noisy chatter. Their endless boasting about the past, mixed with their present madness, left him strangely sad, like watching a grand banquet thrown right before a funeral. Light snow finally woke up as he sorted his building materials, queuing the roof ridges and tiles. He told her they were completely out of chicken, asking if she would eat bread instead. She stared at the bread in his hand, then looked up at him, messy from hours of swinging an axe, and rubbed against his hand affectionately before opening her mouth to take it. Then she stopped, placing the bread back in his hand, drew a line down the middle with her paw, and ran off with only half in her mouth. She scrambled up a nearby pine branch, glancing back at him a few times before lowering her head to nibble her share. The system then told him his pet had sensed his weakness and care, boosting her loyalty by 5 points. He stood there holding his half of the bread, completely baffled, looking at the Cub up in the tree, where her thoughts had wandered, he could not even begin to guess. He worried that going meatless would hurt her loyalty. Talk about a major surprise. Instead, it climbed 5 points, the care part he could just about accept since he had not let her starve, eating the exact same plain food she did, but apparently she decided her master was pathetically weak, getting her loyalty at that price. Kind of stung, he finished his half of the bread and got back to building. Opening the house interface, studying the model, and pressing build. With a deep, steadying breath, the instant the first wall went up, his original small house collapsed, dissolving completely into smoke. Up in the tree, light snow stared with wide, terrified eyes, her den gone in a blink. To her mind, a human who could not survive the cold was now doomed to freeze. Suddenly, the system chimed in, notifying him his pet was willing to follow him through life and death, and that her loyalty had jumped 19 points to max out at 100, meaning she had entered her primary evolution state. He had only placed 2 or 3 walls when the system prompt yanked him out of building mode. Walking over to the pine, he cupped the cub in his hands, having no idea what to say, because all he had actually done was start building a house. Even someone incredibly excited about a new home should not somehow trigger a literal vow to follow him through life and death. The system simply listed her status as a snow fox cub undergoing primary evolution, no countdown, just that state. He did not understand it, but maxed loyalty was great news, so he tucked her into his warm pocket and went back to work. He raised the 4 walls, fitted the door and windows, laid the floor, and finally moved on to the ceiling with 2 meters of clearance against his own height of 181 centimeters. He would not crack his head, but that low ceiling still. Next came the roof ridge, a wooden frame he only truly understood once it was fully crafted. Right then, his primary wood ran short again. Only 20 pieces remained, while a single ridge required 6. He trimmed the wood dimensions to 5 meters long and half a meter wide, requiring 10 of them, leaving him 40 wood short for the ridges alone, not counting the tiles. So he headed back out, axe in hand, to clear the dead trees nearby. The area was sparse, but still scattered with enough to harvest one single trunk at a time. Over the afternoon, with dozens of players frantically chopping away, wood was hard to find. Needle prices tanked again, going at 4 for a single point with no promise of a quick sale. But wood mattered more than coins, so he just listed the stacks. Leaving them unsold didn't bother him. It was past 5 when he finished the roof. He placed wooden tiles over the finished ridge, each one costing a piece of wood. They measured a tiny 30 by 20 centimeters, but assembly required 0 real skill. Once the house stood complete, the system congratulated him on building his first home. He did it all through sheer effort, earning himself a special house construction gift pack. Inside the bare wooden cabin, he planned where he would sleep and eat. He opened the reward pack right there, hoping for a basic living setup. The system delivered far more than he ever expected, offering actual machinery. He got a smelting furnace, a product crafting station, and 4 handy recipes. The system dropped 10 survival points straight into his account. 2 large machines materialized, starting with a furnace that could recycle any material. This machine turned trash to energy, while the crafting station built items. The 4 blueprints allowed him to make a basic bed, bedding, and utilities. He also got plans for a stove and tableware, though each was single-use only. Not that he wanted to craft them twice. The bed required 20 wood. Bedding took 20 cloth, the stove 20 iron, and the tableware 10 wood. These raw materials were easy to get. He bought 10 units of primary cloth. Spending 2 points got him enough fabric to combine with his own stock. With wood still in stock, he put the bed and tableware in queue. The only material that worried him was iron, until a quick search eased his mind. It turned out that mining iron was incredibly common in other regions. Merchants were selling 20 chunks of ore for just 1 single survival point. Wood had started at that cheap rate too, but everyone was building houses now. The price climbed to 13 for a point, and it would keep rising overnight. Wood was decent, stone was great, and even thatch was acceptable in a pinch. No way he would live in a tin shack, freezing in winter, boiling in summer. The crafting process finished incredibly fast because these were basic items. Before long, his brand new furniture lay fully assembled on the floor. The single bed looked surprisingly sturdy, measuring 1.5 meters wide. He positioned it right by the wooden window to catch the morning view. The bedding set included rough sheets, a pillow, and a very thin blanket. It was not soft at all, but laying down to test it proved the insulation worked. The stove was simpler still, featuring a small circular base. He placed a 30-centimeter deep iron pot on top, complete with a flat lid. The kitchen set surprised him by offering much more than expected. He unpacked 2 wooden bowls, 2 pairs of chopsticks, and plates. The kit also had a cutting board, a wooden knife, and a tiny square table. Standing 30 centimeters high, it was perfect for sitting on the floor to eat. Finally, he had secured all the absolute necessities to survive in this place. After sliding the stove against the wall, he decided to pack the heavy machinery away. Both the station and furnace belonged in the yard, not cluttering his home. Even with extra floor space, he hated the idea of bulky machines crowding his room. But stepping outside revealed a grim sight, thick snow piling high across his yard. He froze in the freezing wind. A sudden alert flashed. His courtyard wall was damaged. One glance showed why. Building the new house had ruined the open ground he kept out front for the pines and his sleeping vegetable patch. But the old fence completely gone. Luckily, there was still time. He hurried to the back, sizing up the flat, snowy ground and factoring. In the time he spent sweeping morning and night, picking a starting spot. That cheap wood in his pack was finally going to be useful. Without a hammer, he just had to push each post deep into the snow. Until they hit dirt, the system counted it. It felt incredibly unsafe. But logic did not exist in this world. After all, a guy who could build an entire house like building blocks had no right to complain. The fence crept outward, wrapping his house and pushing the boundaries wider, leaving 2 meters of clearance at the back, 3 meters on the sides, and 5 out front, bringing the pines closer. Once the new yard was barely closed off with the last scraps of that cheap wood, he breathed a sigh of relief. The system immediately rewarded him with a barrage of active notifications that nearly made him trip over his own feet. It announced his home was finished and that his survival skills had leveled up. More importantly, defense mode and hunting mode were now active. Defense mode, hunting made perfect sense, but defense sounded like a massive red flag. It implied threats would actually attack his home, and he had only built a flimsy barrier a solid kick could flatten. His little fox could leap over it. Defend what exactly? Still, when he walked back to the yard and dug a hole near the fence, he actually read the descriptions of these modes. He had to admit the updates were good. He planted his mysterious gray sapling by the fence, knowing it needed a full day to reveal its species. Then he went back to sweeping, feeling quite cheerful. The gist of it was simple. He could hunt wild animals or fight beasts trying to wreck his home with random events, changing weather, and a much faster, chaotic spawn rate of creatures. Beasts would appear completely at random now. Whether he got raided or went hunting, it would happen naturally, and having endless prey meant he would never starve. Meanwhile, Lightsnow finished her evolution quickly. By nightfall, right as he finished his dinner and was about to lie down, the system updated her to a level 2 snow fox cub. Her loyalty was 100 and her combat power reached 10, still tiny, but clearly stronger now. He asked if she was hungry and told her they would hunt tomorrow. For tonight, there was only dry bread, so he set out a piece with water in her bowl on the low wooden table. She was small, but she could easily hop over a meter-high fence outside. So a low table was no trouble. She still could not understand him, but she definitely felt his gentle care. He stroked her head softly. Calling her a good girl, he told her to eat since the cold night might not be peaceful. Fortunately, the lack of light did not bother him. His cabin was bare, with nothing else left to drain his energy. He still needed to figure out his hygiene, reminding himself to build a he planned a toilet in the yard for tomorrow, having no interest in digging frozen ground or getting frostbite for his trouble, while his companion, Lightsnow, ate. He relaxed on the bed and watched the chat channel, which was far busier tonight. Messages were refreshing 2 or 3 times faster than on his very first day. People cried, some cursed, and others denounced the cruelty of this harsh world. Many simply started recounting their lives, expecting absolutely no replies or comfort in return. He did not even care if others insulted them, since they had no hope left for the future. Facing what they believed were their final hours, they just needed to pour their hearts out. That was when a direct message arrived. It was from his friend, Grassland, asking if his shelter was built. And check this out, the clock had already pushed past 10 when he spotted the message. Just as he was drifting off, he thought for a moment and replied that it was finished, a small, square wooden cabin, enough to Live in and very easy on materials. Honestly, the footprint he built was a bit wasteful. Since besides a bed and a stove in the corner, the rest of the room stood completely empty. Which was why he could not understand those who claimed they could not build anything. Even a tiny shelter was fine, 4 walls, a roof, and a floor to lean against. Sleeping against the wall kept you from freezing. Back home, people survived even in phone booths. Grassland replied that it was not bad. The stone house he built ran little warm but had no other issues, though his own chat channel was about to explode. The survivors there were going half mad, even shouting about gathering together to jump into a volcano. Our protagonist replied that a volcano made no sense since he thought grassland was on the prairie. He asked if the plains even had one. His friend explained. There was a massive mountain at the edge of his plains, incredibly far away but visible to every player nearby, and just this evening it had started belching thick smoke. The world outside went pitch black while the peak kept spitting fire like fireworks. This detail sparked a sudden theory in him. Because if everyone could see the exact same mountain, maybe they were all standing in the same region. Someone in his own chat had raised that exact question about the terrain. They had the same flat snow, the same 30-minute walk to reach a slope. If they truly shared a single world, then perhaps every player in this survival game occupied an isolated pocket of space on the very same ground. He told Grassland it was just snowy mountains on his end, with no eruptions visible, but that from his window he could watch the fierce wind whipping the snow into strange shapes looking like some spirit rising from the white. He pushed the window open, stared out at the freezing gale, and quickly shut it. It was far from peaceful. Out there, Grassland messaged him back saying it was almost midnight, hoping they could chat again tomorrow. He agreed, wished his friend well, and then pulled the coarse quilt up, cuddled Light Snow close, closed his eyes, and drifted off. It was a completely dreamless night. When he woke up just past 5, the sky was gray, with a weather indicator next to the interface clock, warning of incoming snow and light winds. He opened his door, tucked Light Snow safely into his pocket, and grabbed his broom to sweep the courtyard once more. It was much larger now, but mostly unchanged. The fresh snow was still over 10 centimeters thick, but he cleared it within 10 minutes using his shovel and broom. Light Snow leaped straight onto the young pine, which had already grown to a full meter, and happily bounced through its branches. A soft blanket of white drifted down over the patch of yard he just cleaned. He picked her up, telling her to look at all the snow. She stirred up and admitting they both needed breakfast before facing this cold. Back inside, he drank some clean water and ate dry bread, and once his condition had fully recovered, he prepared to head out hunting. Today's random quest was no longer about crate hunting. The system demanded he hunt down 3 targets for 9 survival points and a level 1 hunting gift pack. The rewards had finally shifted, and whatever that pack held, his main goal was simply to track down 3 beasts, eliminate them, and claim those 9 points. After a full day of endless chopping, he had gathered a mountain of ice and pine needles and sold them all overnight, and once he paid off yesterday's heavy crafting costs, he had 23 points left. With 20, he could only buy the same old shop items, plus he had the semi-finished crafting bench ready, no need for planting tools either, and the beginner starter set was useless. All he could do was hope. The store's other offers were not totally out of reach. Light Snow lay on his shoulder, starting up her stream of soft cries the moment they cleared the yard to ramble about who knows what. He stopped and looked around, warning her they could not wander too far today. They had to watch for prey and stay extremely alert in case something out there hunted them instead. The nearby dead trees he mostly cleared yesterday had not regenerated yet. He could not tell if they just needed more time or were gone forever. The frozen wasteland around the house looked completely empty, but staring closer he caught something different, a faint mark pressed into the cold snow right beside his cabin, a furrow some animal had left behind, now half buried under fresh snowflakes. It was tough to spot without scanning carefully, and the system gave him absolutely no hints about these tracks. Yet he quietly walked over and began following the trail step by step. He stayed cautious. With only 3 points of combat power, almost any wild prey would easily outmatch him. The smart play was to find the beast first, then judge if he could handle it, or let Light Snow take the lead. With his basic axe ready, he caught sight of a brown shape in the snow ahead, and reached down to hold back the tiny cub, who was already itching to charge. It was about 10 meters away, a wild rabbit. though a normal rabbit in deep snow shouldn't. Leave a deep furrow like that. Light Snow tilted her head, absolutely certain she could catch that prey easily, wondering why he was holding her back. Maybe. Suspecting he doubted her strength just because she was small, he warned her about a wolf nearby, having spotted a gray-white shadow shifting behind a dead tree right next. To the rabbit, a hidden wolf. Light Snow followed his gaze, spotted the danger, and showed absolutely no fear, completely convinced she could deal with that big wolf. Apart, she raised a front paw, mimicking a strike, and lifted her little head toward him to show off her immense confidence. He asked if she was really ready, amused by her, but watch out, this wild wolf was no joke. The system tag finally hovered over the beast, naming it a wandering wild wolf. Combat power 10 with sharp teeth, that was all the eye could see, offering no breakdown of those stats. Meanwhile, Light Snow's own combat power was also 10, complete with sharp claws and teeth, and he genuinely could not tell which of them would win. His instinct was to pull back, but the little cub was absolutely relentless about the wolf, gesturing again and again, but when he still did not get it, she lost patience and flashed the lethal claws hidden inside her tiny paws. He nodded, telling her to go ahead. Those blades suddenly materialized in front of him, nearly as long as her legs, and instantly he understood everything. He clearly did not know the creatures of this brutal world well enough. He had expected normal, sharp cat claws, but hers were straight-up daggers. How a tiny body retracted them was entirely beyond him, especially since he had squeezed her paws before, during cuddles before, and never felt a single hidden threat. She saw his grip loosen, nodded, and leaped down, diving deep under the snow the moment she hit the ground, tunneling forward fast. He did not hang back either, pushing through the deep drifts, still focused on the dying rabbit. A floating screen labeled it critically injured, combat power 0, and dying. Though its true power obviously was not actually 0, it had only crashed to rock bottom under whatever had mauled it. The wolf likely caught the rabbit, then tossed it down as bait after spotting him coming, lurking close to ambush whoever tried to claim the free prize. He stepped up, completely unbothered that the wolf had already claimed it first. He raised yesterday's heavy logging axe and finished off the rabbit's last sliver of health in one clean stroke. The system chimed in. He had killed the injured wild rabbit for one precious survival point, leaving a harvestable corpse. He gripped his axe, spun, and locked eyes with the gray wolf as it burst from the shadows. Now watch. Hiding under the snow-covered canopy, had left its coat a dusty grayish-white. As it lunged at him, the snow shook loose to reveal its true fur. It had 4 or 5 meters to close when Light Snow erupted from the drifts, slamming right into its throat. She only needed that tiny gap beneath the charging predator. The white cub clung tightly to its neck, her daggers tearing through windpipe and major vessels, but the crazed wolf kept charging at him. It was locked on its original prey, blind to the pain. He watched blood spray across the white snow as jaws snapped close, and he swung the axe down hard. The blade bit deep through fur and bone, but his strength stat was too low. The skull did not shatter under his strike, leaving the axe lodged deep inside. Light Snow clawed at its neck again, this time severing the spinal joint completely. Instantly, the system tagged the wolf, critically injured, combat power 5. Dying, it collapsed in the crimson snow, its health bar draining away, yet still clinging to those 5 points. Even with a shattered spine, its eyes burned with pure hatred. It kept snapping, desperately trying to tear him apart before drawing its final breath. He praised Light Snow, planted his boot on the wolf's neck, wrenched his axe free, and slammed the blunt side down until the skull shattered. The system confirmed another kill, one more survival point, and another collectible corpse. He caught the cub as she leaped back into his arms, petting her head in gratitude. Both corpses could be harvested, but his rusty axe only had 5 durability left. He doubted it would survive harvesting either animal. Without the proper tools, he tried pushing the raw corpses into his inventory, but realized unharvested bodies simply would not fit, so he grabbed the rabbit with one hand and hauled the heavy wolf back toward his snowy courtyard. The moment he dropped, a 3-hour refresh countdown appears on each carcass, confirming they need processing. But why snow-covered corpses have no timer remains a mystery he must test. He resolves to investigate during the next hunt. First, he needs a dissection knife. Slaying that wolf had finally pushed his points up to 25. The store unlocked a specialty hunting knife with 1,000 points of durability. Since it cost exactly 25 points, he bought the weapon immediately. but holding it reveals a disappointing truth. It looks like a simple fruit knife. Still, the shop did not cheat him, and the grip feels incredibly solid. An otherwise messy chore becomes quick and effortless with the right blade. He harvests 5 pieces of primary leather, 1 rabbit hide and 4 wolf. Next comes 2 portions of rabbit meat, 8 wolf meat, and 5 bones. Adding 1 beast tendon, his once empty inventory is suddenly packed tight. He heads inside, dropping 2 portions of rabbit meat and 3 waters into a pot. Setting it to stew for an hour frees up 1 inventory slot, but he needs more. If he does not free up space, he cannot gather resources out in the wild. That would be a terrible setback, so he lists the 5 leather pieces online. He prices them at 1 point each, with 0 market fees eating his profit. If they sell, he gains points, and if not, he can easily reclaim them. His only restriction is a limit of 3 active listings on the market. He lists bones at 1 point each and his tendon for 5 points. There is no rush to sell, as he prioritizes storage over quick profits. With 3 listings active and his stew cooking, only the wolf meat remains. His new dissection knife only lost a tiny 2 points of durability. He sheathes the tool, hanging it securely from a cord at his waist. The system interface shows his inventory sitting at 6 out of 10 slots. It holds some wood, bread, water, his first-grade medicine, and the raw meat. With 4 slots open and his meal cooking, he checks his shelter stats. The house energy is steadily draining, so he grabs his wood-chopping axe. He heads out once more, hoping to avoid any incredibly dangerous mutant monsters. His pet, Light Snow, perches on his shoulder and rubs against his face. She is thrilled that the meat she helped secure is already cooking. Although she will not eat it, she understands the cooking process now. He promises her they will find more prey before returning to eat. In high spirits, he rambles about all sorts of meaningless human nonsense. Outside, the blood stains from his earlier kill have completely vanished. He checks the pristine white snow carefully before moving forward confidently. While scanning the snowy expanse for targets, his communication panel flashes. His only friend, Grassland, sent a message checking if he was alive. Asking if his friend just woke up, he confirms that everything is fine. He had forgotten to message earlier, prompting a massive wall of text in return. He wonders if the guy secretly awakened some annoying chatterbox trait. Grassland explains he could not sleep out of sheer dread, watching the chat all night. Surprisingly, the volcano never erupted, but the massive peak is entirely gone. Multiple local survivors confirm they can no longer see the towering peak. Miraculously, even those who lost their shelters overnight are still entirely unharmed. The map has updated, not much is different on his end, and few have frozen too. Death, living without shelter, is risky, but it gives everyone a chance. He checked his chat channel multiple times that morning, nothing new. Most players complain that having a house is the line between safety and doom. They are not dead yet, but they have caught freezing, nasty colds. Stats slide, health drops, restoring stamina becomes impossible. Their energy fades, a basic house shields them from freezing winds and snow, making recovery easier, while a simple stove means hot food to fight the chill. Every hot meal helps, his friend Grassland replies that at least he can hunt where he is, simply leaning over his courtyard wall to watch. Massive herds of sheep and dangerous wild wolves. Sadly, he has no weapon. He asks if the main character found weapons, since none are for sale on the market, hanging over a wall watching sheep, pretty hilarious. He tells the kid he has not seen any weapons for sale either, but that he just bagged a rabbit using a basic logging axe. So there is no harsh weapon restriction on hunting. The kid seems cheerful. So he shares this helpful tip, but whether it works easily is another matter. Still, with the kid's combat power at 9, he could probably catch a rabbit barehanded. Grassland thanks him, then asks if he is a guy, since players only see combat power and race. He confirms he is 25 and male. The kid immediately calls him Big Brother, adding that he is 19, recently entering university in Q province. Before being summoned, he only had a few school days before getting dragged, never meeting the infamous old witch. 19, starting college but Q university. He asks if the kid actually means the old wizard, since he happens to be an alumnus. He remembers a terrifying, stern old professor from those days, known as the old wizard because his surname was Wu and students feared him. Honestly, a junior who has never survived that old wizard's wrath can barely call himself a Q university. Graduate, the kid replies instantly, completely blown away to find an actual school senior here asking for his department. He explains the old wizard is an outdated nickname since the professor fell seriously ill and the heavy hormone treatments gradually changed his appearance, making him look like a sweet, gentle old woman. Despite older students swearing he was only in his 50s, the news leaves him staring blankly. It really is a junior. What are the odds of that landing right in his single, precious friend slot? He replies that was ages ago, revealing that the old man let his illness fester too long, relying on hormones to survive, and that he had actually only recently turned 50. Thinking about that highly demanding professor makes him feel surprisingly nostalgic about his college days, since even though he was in design and never actually took his classes, merely remembering the man brings a shudder. Nobody liked being called out as a warning example in his brutal lectures, the junior asks. Shocked the professor was so young, having imagined him ancient before changing the subject. He wants to know what level his senior reached and why his combat power is currently only 3. Perhaps he was not in the academic department. Recruited so few because entry scores ran too high, scores he wanted but could never reach. He found a dead tree, stopped beneath it and checked his message, suddenly not knowing how to reply. Academic department. Had he really been away from school a year or two and lost track of what departments even existed? And what was wrong with 3 combat power? Back in the dorms, he was the arm wrestling champion. He replied that he felt like the Q university he attended might not even be in the same world. The junior told him to calm down, saying academic department folks loved their strange theories, then asked if he wasn't running some kind of parallel universe research. He felt completely stifled but replied that back in his day, nobody had ever heard of that department. He clicked on the kid's profile, noting the single friend ID and a combat power that had quietly climbed to 10. He suspected all over again that he was genuinely chatting with a junior from a different world. Crazy, right? The junior replied, insisting his combat power was simply too low, doubting anyone at school was that weak, since even the seniors and juniors in that academic department rarely skipped physical training. The kid also seemed to realize his stats didn't match the seniors he remembered. After a long back and forth, they both finally realized they were separated by a dimensional gulf. He asked whether, before coming here, the junior had been from Earth, since he knew nothing about parallel worlds and was just looking for a topic. A junior from a parallel world was not something he could easily believe. The kid bristled at the word Earth, insisting on his own identity, that his people were from their own world, definitely not Earthlings as he put it. He sighed, replying that he at least was an Earth person and decided to leave it there. Parallel was parallel, and that beat learning the average combat power at Q University had hit 9 the moment he graduated, slightly less crushing surely. His combat power had ticked up into double digits, but at least across different worlds he could comfort himself that his weakness wasn't entirely his own fault. As for the dizzying business of parallel worlds and separate dimensions, after being dragged into this survival game itself, what could still be impossible? The junior fired off a string of questions, amazed that parallel worlds were real, asking if everyone's combat power on his side was so weak, and if that meant they did not have to go into the sea to fight marine creatures. Either. The kid clearly took those 3 points as a normal baseline. He told him they did not need that kind of combat, since martial arts were rare. Where he lived, with technology developed the way it was, a single shell could level a building. He wasn't certain he had it right, but some military programs he had watched suggested exactly that, and that was only the publicly visible hardware, the rest glimpsed in scraps of short videos. The junior replied that their paths had branched, but praised him anyway, impressed that he could hunt in this place with only 3 combat power. The kid urged him to keep going, suggesting his people had untapped potential with genes not yet developed, and promised to go try catching prey barehanded to send him some mutton. He told him to go ahead and be careful, then closed the chat. He wasn't sunk in disappointment, whatever the kid Yaben could only imagine, harboring just a few vague guesses about this junior from another dimension. He would research that later, since right now he still needed prey to finish his daily task. This strange world had dragged in everyone, stacking different dimensions together with an unknown number of non-humans. Striving to survive and growing stronger was his only focus. He had to concentrate on building his power, Beside him, Light Snow had no idea what he was doing, but she stayed quiet and did not disturb him. When he moved again, she chirped, asking Kyrios what was going on. He told her. It was nothing, he had just learned some things, and they needed to get stronger. Much stronger, even though she could not follow his words, he kept talking. During that one-sided conversation of shared feelings, he finally found his third prey of the day, a healthy wild rabbit with a tag displaying Combat Power 4 and a kicking leg trait, was that its main skill. He pointed the rabbit out and told Light Snow to handle it. She shot off. Without even bothering to sneak, she moved so fast she was practically invisible. The system logged the kill, awarding 1 survival point and a collectible corpse. Even though the cub did the work, the credit still went to him. His task updated to 3 of 3 prey hunted, dropping 9 survival points and a first-grade hunting gift pack into his account, bringing his total to 10 points. None of his trades had sold yet, but he was in no hurry. Crouching down, he carefully harvested the rabbit, taking 1 primary leather, 2 rabbit meat, and 1 beast bone. No tendon dropped since the creature had been too weak to drop it. Stashing the materials, Yaben headed home, carrying Light Snow as she nuzzled his hand. His inventory was full. Again, not knowing what the hunting pack held, he decided opening it at home would be much easier, especially since he promised the cub they would eat. After one last hunt, even if she could not grasp his words, he did not want to break his promise. She rolled around playfully on his shoulder, unable to understand the language, but absolutely sure of a good meal once they got back inside. Light Snow hopped down and settled beside the wooden table, tilting her head to watch him, anticipation flickering in those round, inky eyes as she waited for dinner. The system tagged the stewed rabbit meat green quality, granting a primary cunning rabbit effect, plus an extra 3 speed points for 1 hour. This was a solid stat bonus. Now he wondered if the cub could finish an entire portion of the 2 stewed meals if he served it. She stared at the plate in front of her. A slab of rabbit meat larger than herself glared at him unhappily, then raised a tiny paw and sliced it cleanly into 3, wanting only 1 piece at a time. He told her to eat slowly and watch the heat, moving the other 2 pieces to a separate plate. He noted that food served in tableware showed no expiration countdown on the table, though raw ingredients still had to sit in plates to qualify. He shredded his own rabbit meat, added soup, and ate slowly with some bread. Full at last, he opened his personal status panel, but his old hope still had not come true. The system listed him as Yaben of the Snow Mountain region, human, with see-through talent. His health sits at 86, stamina 97, energy 88, and combat power at 3. That 5-piece warmth set provides solid bonuses to temperature, defense, and overall speed. The temporary cunning rabbit effect adds 3 speed, alongside his loyal companion Light Snow, a level 2 snow fox cub boasting 100 loyalty and 10 combat power. She is healthy and active, while his 10-slot inventory is packed with bread and water. He carries wood, leather, blood, and spirit pills, along with wolf and rabbit meat. Some beast bones and a hunting gift pack complete his stash, beside 10 survival points. But what catches his eye is the temporary food buff being categorized under equipment. Instead of being added to his base combat power, this confirms his main theory. Gear bonuses do not count toward a player's actual, raw combat power at all. This means the rookie's rising combat power represents real personal growth, not just gear. No fancy equipment is carrying him, meaning his own low score is painfully his. Pretty brutal, right? But things improve when he opens the hunting gift pack. Inside, he finds recipes for a simple longbow, simple arrows, and 3 beast tendons. He learns both crafting blueprints the very instant they appear before him. Just that morning, he was complaining about the total lack of weapons for sale. Now, the system has simply handed him the blueprints to make his own bow. The bow requires 3 beast tendons and 5 wood, while arrows need 1 wood and 1 bone apiece, finally explaining the gift of those 3 starter tendons. They provide just enough material to string a brand new bow from scratch. While tendons are rare, bone drops from almost any creature he manages to hunt. Once he has the weapon, ammo will be easy. He immediately cues the crafts. A minute later, the system confirms the bow is complete with max durability. That single arrow craft also yields a useful bundle of 20 wooden arrows. The bow itself is carved wood with a tough beast tendon string. But when he tests the pull, he immediately realizes there is a catch. It requires 2 strength points to draw, and he can barely pull it back. This proves his raw strength and combat power are not the same thing. The arrows are crude, just basic wooden shafts tipped with sharp bone shards. With no fletching and a bare round knock, they look incredibly basic. Calling them simple is being generous, but a ranged weapon is still a weapon. He is incredibly eager to test its power, instructing Light Snow to get ready. 2 portions of rabbit meat are left stewing before they head out to hunt. The little fox cub yips from his shoulder, wagging her exceptionally long tail. Her bright round eyes are already scanning the endless snow for any movement. Knowing a meat dinner is waiting back home gives the cub plenty of motivation. Before finding any wild game, he spots a white supply crate under a tree. He cracks it open immediately, finding standard bread, water, and 3 primary wood. Those materials quickly go into his full inventory before continuing through the silence. It is well past 4 in the afternoon when he finally spots a target. The floating system tag identifies it as a wild rabbit with 5 combat power. Motioning for Light Snow to wait, he draws back his new wooden bow. Aiming from over 10 meters away, his arrow drives clean through the target. The clean headshot triggers a penetrating attack bonus, awarding him 1 survival point. Perhaps the creature was just fragile, or his own luck has finally turned. Whether it was a lucky critical hit or pure skill, the kill was his. He bagged the prey and kept hunting, despite his pack already bulging with crates. The fresh rabbit had no decay timer, no rush. There was no need to rush. Suddenly, Light Snow leaped onto his shoulder. She pointed her tiny paw toward a dead tree ahead where some white fluff sat. It was half buried in snow. He jokingly asked her if that was her relative. Stopping in his tracks, he closely studied the snow around the tree. He finally confirmed it. A real fox was indeed crouching right there. A fully grown version of her. Suddenly, a cold system notification flashed. The system warned him of an aggressive beast, those wild eyes locked on. His heart sank. The floating screen read, Snow Fox, Combat Power 22. Sharp claws, high speed, and absolutely no option to tame it. This beast was nothing but pure, unbridled hostility on 4 legs. Light Snow looked at him, and he caught a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She seemed to decide they wanted the exact same thing. She nodded firmly, eager to launch an immediate assault. Pointing at the massive fox, he asked her again if she was sure. He felt a bit ridiculous talking to a pet, but she just kept nodding. Whatever loot that adult beast carried, his companion wanted it bad. Her choice was simple. They had to take down the massive target. He released his hold and let her loose, then scrambled up a nearby dead tree. With 22 combat power, outrunning this predator on the ground was impossible. Waiting to become beast food was no option. He climbed. He snapped off the lower branches as he went, making the trunk much harder to scale. This clever move bought him time and a perfect shooting platform. Fortunately, his old childhood tree-climbing skills held up incredibly well under pressure. Light Snow watched him scale the tree and nodded happily, signaling she understood the plan. She was going to lure the monster straight to him. He warned her to be careful. Wrapping his legs tightly around the trunk, he drew his bow back fully. He kept his eyes glued on the field. The massive fox mocked her provocation. It lunged, paused, and let out a massive yawn. The predator flashed sharp fangs in the cold light before raising a front paw. Its curved claws glinted, longer and deadlier than Light Snow's own. It was showing off. He seized that arrogant delay and let an arrow fly. The sharp bone arrowhead tore forward, but the target dodged at the last millisecond. The shot only grazed its tail, barely scratching its massive health pool. But that small scratch was more than enough to unleash its absolute fury. It whipped its head around, spotted him in the tree, and charged the trunk. Light Snow slashed while its back was turned, but her tiny attack did nothing. The monster's defense was far too high for her small claws to penetrate. Ignoring her completely, the beast kept its furious eyes locked onto the shooter. It began to scale the bare, branchless bark with terrifying speed. Just as it started scaling, Light Snow rushed in from behind. She sank her teeth deep into its hind leg, tearing loose clumps of thick fur. He kept firing from above, his wild arrows slowly dragging down its health bar. Making progress up the trunk, the giant fox's health slowly chipped away, but still. It climbed when its health dropped by a third, and it kept coming. He cursed and let go of the trunk, dropping straight down. He had climbed high, and a fall of over 10 meters cost him nearly half his health, even with the snow. To break the fall, but it beat being cornered, he crammed a blood. replenishment pill into his mouth without waiting for the last one to finish. Then yanked out his old axe with only 5 durability left and thrust it at the beast. As it followed him down and pounced, the fox simply bit the axe out of midair, took absolutely no damage, and chewed away the last of its remaining durability until the system notified him his weapon was gone. Those jaws could shear straight through an axe. Good to know, the fall had plunged the fox's health to critical, so he bit down another blood replenishment pill and kicked hard at the open wound on its flank, deliberately avoiding the head because a strike to the skull might do more damage, but he was not about to feed his foot to those jaws. Claws raked his calf and opened a deep tear, his health bar sliding down, forcing him to swallow a third pill just to stay upright. Light Snow momentarily stunned up on the trunk as the big beast leaped down, recovered, and jumped after it, losing half her own health too. The impact, yet she lunged straight for its throat. The giant fox twisted and snapped toward her belly, but just as its teeth sank in, the health bar he had been grinding down all this time finally emptied. The system confirmed the kill of the snow fox for 3 survival points, then surprised him with a brave 1 bonus 10 extra points for fighting through an overwhelming gap in combat power, and flagged the carcass as harvestable. His vision swam. The medicine had kept him alive, but a heavily injured state cannot simply be healed away. He had started the day with 6 blood pills and burned 3 in minutes. Now he knelt to scoop Light Snow from the drift and fed her. One half her fur was stained a deep crimson, but the gash on her belly slowed its bleeding and began to close. She tried to make a sound, but it came out faint and fragile. He gently whispered to her that they were going home. Cradling her in one arm as her health slowly recovered, he gripped the dead beast's heavy carcass with the other and began the long walk back. On the way, he checked his system panel, dug out 2 spirit pills, took one and offered her the other, hoping a clear mind would somehow speed her recovery. His own health sat at 2/3, so he decided to leave the remaining blood pills alone, saving those last 2 for a true emergency. If he had not consumed them so quickly earlier, death would have claimed him. Long before that beast fell, pale daylight still remained when he dragged the kill into the shelter. Utterly exhausted and finished for the day, he set the wounded cub onto the bed, watching her drift to sleep immediately as her health slowly crept upward. Only then did he finally let himself breathe. If that beast had not targeted him due to his high threat level and gone for her first, they would both be dead under the ice. The massive strength gap had been brutal, and survival had only been guaranteed because the beast targeted him. He would have chosen to run rather than fight, but there was no choice. Now, with the cub safe and resting, he headed back outside to the yard. He processed the wild rabbit he shot earlier, getting 2 meat and 1 basic leather plus 1 bone. Next, he turned to the fox, whose carcass was badly damaged. Because of that, the skinning ran lame, yielding only 2 basic leathers and a single green quality intermediate leather, but the rest came through: 6 fox meat, 5 bone, 2 beast tendons, 4 claws, 2 teeth, and 1 completely new item. A rare fox beast spirit stone. The system described it as a material for refining pills, making medicine, or as an experience boost for fox type pets. It was the exact kind of rare drop harvested from high-level beasts. The stone had a long list of uses, but only one option mattered to him. Right now, he left the other materials piled outside on the snow, since their 3-hour timer meant they would last, and carried the spirit stone inside to set it right in front of the sleeping Light Snow. She sleepily lifted a paw, hugging it tight and gnawing away, biting piece by piece while a faint white light enveloped her body. The system marked her as a level 2 snow fox cub, displaying no fancy effects, just that simple tag. It did not make him wait long at all, finishing in under a minute and listing her as a level 3 snow fox cub. Her loyalty was 100, combat power 15, with sharp claws and teeth, plus a brand new speed trait, despite still recovering from her injuries. 5 points of combat power and a fresh characteristic from a single stone. He had seen speed on the big fox's status profile earlier, but never actually saw it moving fast, which probably meant it had been too careless to even bother using the skill. 2 sale notifications popped up, prompting him to open the trading screen. His 5 basic leathers and 5 beast bones had already sold, bringing in 10 points immediately. That boosted his total balance to 34. Talk about perfect timing. Now the survival shop finally unlocked a few brand new options. He opened it with high hopes, finding a 6-slot Storage cabinet blueprint for 30 points, the perfect way to stop drowning. In his cramped inventory, he bought the recipe instantly, the craft. Required only 20 basic wood, which he luckily had more than enough of, and a minute later a sturdy little cabinet stood inside, taking up a square meter of floor space and standing 1.5 meters tall. It had 2 rows of 3 doors, 6 in total. He could easily shove items inside manually or transfer them straight from his inventory using his mind, although he still had to crack a door open manually. The following morning, he sat down to sort his massive pile of loot. He had beast claws, sharp teeth, leathers, tendons, fox meat, and bones. Along with older wolf and rabbit meat, he started pricing everything on the trading market. The beast tendon he listed earlier was still sitting there unsold, and since he could not pull it and wanted to leave the price alone, he worked around it. Claws and teeth seemed perfect for crafting weapons, but he had no blueprints for them, so the smart move was converting them into points to buy items he could actually use. 4 beast claws went up for 2 points each and sold fast, netting 8 points, while 2 beast teeth at 5 points each quickly drew 10 points within a few short minutes. Dozens of identical listings sat at the exact same price, so selling his was incredibly easy. The rest cleared out just as smoothly, selling 4 basic leathers for 2 points each along with the green. Some intermediate leather fetched 10 points after a slow half hour. The beast tendon he feared was a dud finally sold before dark. His 8 pieces of wolf meat brought 4. 6 bones brought 3. When the dust settled, his inventory held only the essentials: bread, water, 6 primary wood, and 2 blood pills. 4 spirit replenishing pills, 4 rabbit meat, 6 fox meat with slots down to 7 of 10. He had opened a couple more crates that afternoon for extra wood, but the real win was the points. The entire sorting run brought in 41 survival points, adding to the 4 left over after he bought the cabinet recipe. He now sat at 45, not rich but wealthier than yesterday. He cleaned the yard before dinner, heated up the rabbit meat, and sat down to eat off his small table. That was exactly when the junior from the other dimension messaged him again. Grassland wished him a good evening, asking how his harvest had gone. He responded that he had hauled in quite a lot, but also nearly died in the process. Thinking of that wild fox made him pretty curious about those beast spirit stones. So he searched the trade channel and almost choked when he saw the prices. Well over 100 beast spirit stones were listed for rabbits, foxes, and wolves. The cheapest rabbit stones ran 100 points, while fox stones were much pricier, going from 200 up to 1,000 points. Surely nobody would buy those. While tiger stones sat oddly cheap, starting at just 150, Grassland fretted about his dangerous encounter, warning him that his combat power was simply too weak. To stay safe, the junior admitted he originally wanted to brag about his own haul, but now felt too bad to actually rub it in. Our guy reassured him, saying a blood replenishment pill had healed him right up. It made sense that Grassland got more, with his combat power in the double digits and real battle experience, even if the junior claimed to have killed a tiger, he wouldn't have batted an eye. He had just defeated a snow fox with 22 combat power, though luck played a major part. The junior laid out his haul: 3 wild rabbits, 2 wild sheep, and an adult wolf that bit him on the back, which would have been deadly. Back home, but a single blood pill easily patched it up. During the harvesting, the wolf dropped a beast spirit stone worth at least 100 points. Then he did something that left our guy staring blankly, sending over a designated trade list. Checking it, he found Grassland offering him 6 whole portions of mutton and 2 lamb chops, all in exchange for just 2 primary wood. Primary wood normally sold at 10 pieces per point, while mutton was only 2. This meant the junior was practically handing him 5 points of food for absolutely nothing. What was his deal? There was no way this was just schoolmate loyalty, because he did not buy that excuse for a second. Plus, none of his real schoolmates had power like this, Grassland told him. To take it, claiming hunting with low combat power was a massive hassle. Still, our main character refused. Back home, nobody gave away free stuff like this, especially based on some old-school connection that was likely fake anyway. He was no saint, and he did not like giving away his own hard-earned possessions, but he hated taking charity. The truer reason, which he kept to himself, was that he was not hungry, and if the junior had offered, if that fox had pinned him back then, he would have grabbed the knife instantly. Without a single hesitation, different times, different choices, the trader pushed back confused that school ties were so weak where our protagonist lived, saying that on the battlefield his people pulled comrades from the same school out of the rubble. First treating classmates like family, our hero replied he was not his classmate and that back in his day, classmates clawed and schemed against each other over single open slot, unlike his world where everyone united against dangerous, foreign threats. He finished his bread, gulped down the warm meat soup and pulled the blanket over himself before replying. He knew that mutton came with heavy strings attached, so he was glad he had left it alone. If he took food and then the man hit trouble and asked for help, he would feel obligated to assist. He could not accept a gift and then ignore a cry for help. His heart was still too soft for that coldness. Soon, the trader replied, no longer pushing the gift directly, but begging him to accept it, swearing he would not send anything else. He had just gotten carried away by a great day of hunting and offered to call it prepayment for ice to make things easier, so our hero could send some ice blocks down the line. Future deals were unreliable, but this trade would at least secure a slot on his end, so he agreed and finalized the transaction. He dropped the fresh lamb chops straight into the pot to stew for over an hour, hoping to have them ready by morning. Neither of them chatted after that, and he was genuinely exhausted. He checked the chat channel for a bit, chuckled at the noise, and went to sleep. The loudest drama on the channel that night was the outrage over those teams that had formed earlier. People had paid survival points as a kind of tuition to join, got a cultivation method in return, and then practiced it for days with zero results. Worse, they had been so busy practicing their moves that they skipped gathering essential supplies, so when their starter shelters vanished, they had no points left to buy wood and rebuild, and many fell dangerously sick from the freezing cold. The ones who boasted loudest about their squads were now screaming the loudest, demanding their points back or some materials in return. But in a brutal world where nobody could see another living soul, points traded away for empty promises were gone forever. The chat turned into a wall of constant complaints, burying basic talk about hunting or crafting under the mountain of rage. It was impossible to follow a single real conversation without digging through the noise. He slept deeply, and when he opened his eyes, the heavily injured beast cub from the day before was perched by his pillow staring down at him. He reached up, stroked her head, and whispered, "Good morning." The little creature had fought with everything she had, just like him, because anything less meant certain death. She lowered her head, pressing her soft, fluffy face against his cheek to rub against him. In her mind, she survived, which meant this clumsy human had saved her life, remembering yesterday this foolish creature who leaped from a tree to secure the giant fox's spirit core for her and got himself mauled for his trouble. She resolved right then to grow much stronger, so he would never be injured on her account again. He had no idea what was passing through her little mind. He just told her they needed to heat up breakfast and he would feed her lamb chops today, hoping the little one would actually enjoy them. After warming up last night's leftovers, he did his usual quick sweep of the yard. He spent 15 points on a fresh axe and headed out to chop down some nearby trees. Using the lumber, he built 3 walls and a door, then dug a pit behind the house. He boxed it in to make a rough temporary toilet, wanting nothing buried in the snow. The dozen odd ice blocks he gathered from chopping were sent over to Grassland. It was a trade for a single piece of lamb, which the buyer clearly had plenty of. The deal went through half an hour later, with Grassland sending a sleepy thank you. He replied that he was usually up early, adding that the lamb chops tasted great. Then he split the freshly cooked chops with light snow, finishing a satisfying breakfast. Today's daily task, super simple, just hunt down a single beast for 3 points. It offered a level 1 hunting pack, a tiny reward, but he was not complaining. But hey, having any quest beats sitting around doing absolutely nothing. Before heading out, he finally organized his inventory inside the new wooden cabinet. He left the bread, water, and planks behind, leaving meat to fill his inventory slots. With his blood and spirit pills, along with the heavy bow resting on his back, a dissection knife, and a heavy chopping axe, he was already carrying quite a lot. Having only a few wooden arrows left, he bought 2 beast bones to make more. He crafted 2 fresh bundles, falling into a comfortable rhythm of trading and crafting. He only bought materials as needed, then left some rabbit meat stewing in the pot. With the lively cub back on his shoulder, he stepped out, back to work. Light snow played for a bit around a pine tree that now reached his shoulder. Then she bounded back down to where he crouched beside his small vegetable patch. The seeds had actually sprouted, sending delicate little shoots pushing up through the soil. Seeing actual green shoots pushed his worries away. He could not help but grin. Even if survival in this absolute frozen wasteland felt like a complete pipe dream. He whispered to the cub that fresh vegetables would be ready soon. He also checked on that mysterious sapling, which was identified as an Apollonia tree. Its grade remained a mystery, but a strange description mentioned drawing a nesting phoenix. He had plenty of complaints about that absurd claim, but decided to keep quiet. Why stress over mythical birds? He had enough on his plate already. So he chose to treat it as a simple decorative tree and nothing more. Besides, if a mythical bird actually arrived, it would likely burn his house down. With light snow by his side, he ventured out to search for crates and prey. The dead trees he had chopped down earlier had not regrown, confirming his suspicions. Suddenly, he spotted the first supply crate, perched strangely high up in a tree. It was a spot he would never have noticed without the system highlighting it. But the climb seemed worth the effort, especially when he saw its unique quality. It was a green tier crate, just like the one that had gifted him his axe. He quickly chopped the trunk, letting the crate crash down onto the icy ground. However, the status screen showed the container was damaged, threatening the loot inside. He opens it up anyway and gets quite a pleasant shock: 3 bread, 6 water. A grape seedling, 3 cucumber seeds, and an inventory expansion voucher. He had opened plenty of crates before, only ever pulling tomatoes and cabbage, so grapes and cucumbers alone feel incredibly generous, but that voucher is what stops him. The system stated it added 1 inventory slot per use, with no limit on stacking. Since he had been completely starved for space since day 1, he used it immediately. His inventory ticked up to 11 slots and was promptly crammed full again. It held the blood and spirit pills, 2 arrow bundles, 28 primary planks, 11 inferior planks, 4 ice blocks, 6 pine needles, his new bread and water, the grape seedling and cucumber seeds, 1 tiny slot added, yet he was still bursting at the seams. As always, the storage space was nowhere near big enough. Back home, he dropped off the food, then relisted the 4 ice blocks and 6 pine needles. Sadly, the ice now fetched only a single point for 4, and the needles still held steady at 2 points for 6. Next, he found an empty corner of the yard and started digging. A few minutes of labor turned a square meter of frozen ground into loose soil. He planted the grape seedling there, then tilled a strip beside the old vegetable patch to sow the 3 cucumber seeds. That freed up 6 more slots, so he went right back out to chop. The lumber barely paid, but the ice blocks and pine needles earned back his axe expenses, and the wood was kept as his own hard-won wage. He sold in small batches at standard prices because smaller lots sold much faster. No buyer wanted a mountain of one material, so he watched his wood pile climb with a quiet sense of satisfaction. By 11:30, they still had not seen a single animal. He told Lightsnow their luck must have walked out the door, meaning they were heading back for lunch with absolutely no prey to show for their efforts. She tilted her head, completely confused by his glum tone. She was probably guessing it was the lack of meat. He assured her they would be fine and would try again later. They were bound to find something. The 3 points did not matter to him. It was that hunting gift pack he really wanted. They had at least picked up 2 crates that morning besides the wood, so he headed home. He made sure the seedlings had not frozen, warmed some meat, and ate with the little cub. The second they stepped out after lunch, Lightsnow vanished in a flash of white. He shouted after her and tried to follow, but she had burst into that wild speed and vanished. Talk about leaving a guy in the dust. He was left with nothing to do but wait. Fortunately, minutes later she came trotting back. Worried, he walked over and inspected the wild chicken. She had reduced to a bloody mess. The system credited the kill with 1 point, flagged the body for harvesting, and updated his daily task to 1 of 1. Prey hunted. He received 3 points and a level 1 hunting pack, 4 points total plus the bonus pack. He was still incredibly rattled though, because she had run off alone. If she ran into any trouble out there, at least if she stayed close, he could feed her a blood pill instead of letting her bleed out somewhere far away. She could not reach. She rubbed against his hand and hopped obediently up to his shoulder and settled. Her whole manner said she had caught dinner, so he had absolutely no reason to look unhappy. He told her she did great, and next time they would hunt together. He felt right then that he truly understood what she meant. Processing the chicken properly should never have required a knife, but This was system logic, so he processed it the required way and received a plucked chicken along with 24 feathers. The feathers dropped in piles, and a quick glance at the market channel showed plenty for sale, the cheapest for 25. To secure a point, he listed his 24 items and called it close. Then he took the cub home, put down his things, and opened the hunting gift pack. Inside were 3 blood replenishment pills, 4 beast bones, and a wooden fence. Crafting recipe. The pills alone made it totally worthwhile since they could pull him back from the edge in a crisis. The bones were nothing special, but that fence recipe made him glance at his own crude barrier and feel quietly mocked, as if the system were pointing out his fence was just too rough around the edges, offering him the real thing instead. Naturally, he learned it anyway. 1 fence cost 10 primary wood per craft and ran a meter long, which gave him pause, but curiosity won and he made one to check. It came with 20 defense and 2,000 durability. That changed his mind entirely. No beast had actually attacked his home yet, but he doubted that peace would last, and this sturdy wall would make the place far safer. He told Light Snow they were still too poor, setting that first proper fence outside the Polonia tree before taking her out to chop every tree site. Whenever an axe wore out, he bought another. When a selling slot freed up, he listed more ice and needles, spending the whole afternoon working hard, returning home only at sundown. His inventory now held 1,265 primary wood and over 300 inferior, so he fed those into the material smelting furnace, which turned junk materials into the house energy he burned while cooking several meals a day since his reserves were running low. 324 inferior wood converted to only 32 and a fraction of energy, a brutal 10-to-1 rate. Materials but junk items could not be traded, making smelting the only real option left for them. He had used gray wood for fences before, the weak ones with 0 defense that only served to mark his yard. The new recipe was a different beast entirely. An hour of crafting left 80 wooden fences in his inventory, and this time he wanted to expand the yard properly, mostly because he finally had the wood to spare. Before total darkness, he opened the interface, picked the layout, and set the fences in a square 10 meters on each side, then doubled them up, creating 2 layers. The defense of each fence stayed the same, but a second wall meant a fallback option if the outer layer failed, allowing him to pull fences from quiet areas and move them wherever enemies attacked. It felt extravagant to use all that wood, but when Light Snow shook him awake in the dead of night, he realized this heavy defense was a lifesaver. It was just past midnight, barely any time after he fell asleep, when her urgent yelps got him moving. He rushed outside to see a handful of wolves clawing frantically at the fence, only 7 in total. He warned the cub to stay back, intending to wear them down slowly while he drew his bow and opened fire. The system tag showed 6 ordinary wild wolves with 28 combat power each, boasting sharp claws and sharp teeth, along with a pack leader boasting 36 combat power and special command attributes. This deadly ability had the whole pack hammering a single section of fence in unison. 2,000 durability was a solid buffer, and 20 defense limited their damage to single digits per hit. But 6 savage wolves striking every second could break the barrier in under minute. The inner section was already taking heavy blows when he rushed out. The outer layer completely stripped away. He worked fast, sliding fresh barriers. He steps in to block them, locking his sights onto one wolf and pounding its body shot after shot, knowing that fence durability was basically just a second health bar, and this became a brutal contest of whose bar would empty first. He never shifted too many at once. He kept always slotting in a brand new fence right when those wolves thought they had broken through. Talk about perfect timing. This kept the pack focused, allowing him to keep firing without them scattering. When the first wolf finally collapsed under his arrows, the pack leader threw back its bloodthirsty head and howled, and the remaining 5 wolves snapped into high burst mode, their destructive beast power surging all at once as he shoved new fences up to hold the line and leaned into the opening because bursts dropped there. Defense too. He cranked his heavy bow mechanically, releasing shot after deadly shot after shot. Their burst ran out inside a minute, followed by a sluggish stretch of about 10 minutes. Though even sluggish, they outmatched him, keeping the fight grim. But his math was incredibly simple. As long as the pack could not break in, he could grind them down to keep Light Snow from rushing out and getting surrounded. He firmly held her back while a steady stream of longbows and arrows rolled off the crafting table nearby. Whenever he ran dry, he grabbed fresh weapons, his Massive mountain of primary would allow this waste, and the beast bones he needed still cost 2 for a point, cheap enough not to sting given the day's ice. In Neo earnings, when all 5 ordinary wolves lay dead, the leader lost its nerve and turned to run. That was when Light Snow, penned up in watching the entire fight play out in mounting frustration, finally broke free. She vaulted off the top of the fence. In her accelerated state, she easily outpaced the fleeing leader, lunging straight for its eye, then darting away right after the strike. Having already learned the classic art of hit and run, with one eye clawed open, the leader completely forgot about running, wheeling around in a blind rage for revenge, and in that brief moment he shifted the fences and walled it inside, only then did he realized that this tactical placement was not just for defense. With enough fences, he could trap any attacking beast in a pocket and grind it down slowly. The beast thrashed, its health barely dented since he had only blinded one eye. Trapped and frantic, it had nowhere to go. His arrows did little damage, but inflicting direct damage was not his main goal. Wearing it out was key. After another half hour, 3 notices suddenly lit up. He got 80 survival points for stopping the night attack, and 80 more for wiping out the entire pack, plus a highly valuable wolf pack nemesis aura. Clearing them without a single wound raised his damage against wolves by 1/10. He sat down weakly in the fresh snow, his stamina and energy completely depleted. If he had not forced himself to keep pushing, he would have collapsed long before, but it was finally over, despite getting 0 warning from the system. There was not even a flicker, just light snow jolting him awake and the survival manual recording, only after the fact that ravenous wolves were already clawing at his fence with no warning beforehand. It felt like a total scam. Highly profitable scam, though, whenever he had hunted individual wolves on his own. Even the leader type, there had been no rewards at all, so he assumed defense earned nothing, but the rewards had simply been pooling together, paying out all at once upon his successful defense. Even after spending his points, he was down to 183, with about 100 wood left. He went back to crafting fences, though a second layer was too expensive now. Still beyond the main outer ring, he kept over 20 spare fences on hand. He could shift them around just in case. He told Lightsnow they finally had meat. Once he rearranged the barriers, the 7 wolf carcasses materialized inside their secure yard. He rested for a bit until some of his stamina finally recovered. Then he knelt down with his knife. The harvest was massive 48 wolf meat. 13 beast tendons, 38 bones, 45 primary leather, and 8 green intermediate leather, 13 fangs, 27 claws, and 4 wolf beast spirit stones. He still wondered why some wolves dropped fewer teeth or claws than others. 4 spirit stones was a haul he loved. Just then, Lightsnow padded over. She fixed her big, pleading eyes on the glowing stone in his hand. She begged to eat it, though he wondered if she could handle wolf energy. The system tag said species restricted, but she just stared as his fingers loosened. She lowered her head and chewed, biting off huge chunks while her tiny paws held on. She pressed her paws against his hand, and after polishing off all 4, rolled over. She fell fast asleep right in his palm. Her evolution finished quickly. Her stats now showed level 5 Snowfox Cub, Loyalty 100, Combat Power 25. She got a new burst trait alongside her sharp claws, fangs, and speed. This proved it. Beast Spirit Stones had practically no species limits for a fox. He tucked the sleeping cub next to his pillow. He wanted to sleep too. It was deep in the night, but looking at his loot, he chose to sell first. He listed 27 claws at 2 points each, easily securing 54 survival points. 13 teeth went up at 5 each for 65, leaving just 1 sales slot. He picked his priciest item, 8 green intermediate leathers for 80 points. He doubted everything would sell, but those slots held over 200 points. He laid down content. The rest could wait until morning to see what sold. He went to bed past 2 in the morning, but was awake before 6. The cub was still sleeping, so he heated up some stewed rabbit meat. Then he went out to shovel snow, which was much harder with a bigger yard. While shoveling, he checked the trade channel and saw everything had already sold out. 54, 65, and 80 added up to 199 points. Combined with his leftovers, he had 383, just shy of 400. He had to tell himself not to rush, taking it one careful step at a time. 13 beast tendons went up for 52, and 38 bones earned him another 19 points. More sale notices rolled in as he worked. prompting him to list 44 primary leathers. Those went for 22. Once the yard was clear, the system gave him a bonus. He got 2 points for keeping a clean courtyard, then he sat down for breakfast. That was when the survival mall finally showed him exactly what he wanted. With everything sold, his points surged past 500, sitting at 502. Leaning back, he smiled. This was the moment he'd been desperately waiting for. Gene evolution fluid priced at exactly 500 survival points, limited to 1. The description was completely bare, just the words, "Initiate gene evolution." It did not promise any specific outcome, but its mere existence brought hope. He finally had real hope of growing stronger. Sure, martial arts were possible, but he knew training or some other path could lift him too, but those took years and proper guidance. Without the right method, people easily ruined themselves. Trying a combat power of 3 was just too weak, so he would take any shortcut the world could offer. Shoving his excitement down, he shared a meal with the cub and went out to clear the daily random quest. He just had to find 1 supply crate, which was done quickly with light snow tagged along for the fresh air. Then he lay on the bed, stroked her head and softly told her he was only sleeping so she should not worry, still uneasy about what this evolution might do to his body. He had watched her evolve through nothing but a brief nap, and he hoped his own transition would go just as gently. She lay by the pillow staring at him with those round eyes. He bought the gene evolution fluid and swallowed it in 1 gulp. Instantly, an oval bubble bloomed around him, lifting him off the mattress and leaving him floating in midair. Light snow raised a tiny paw to bat at the bubble. Her paw passed straight through. It was clearly there, yet completely intangible. Driven by curiosity, she crept closer and tried to leap right onto her human sleeping body, only to watch her tiny self pass straight through and land back on the mattress. She tried it again and again, and after confirming she truly could not touch him, she slumped listlessly beside the pillow to wait for her silly human to return. But get this, he knew absolutely none of this. The moment the fluid hit, he was somewhere else entirely. He stood in a strange void packed with dense points of light, every color flashing. Somehow he understood that each star was unique, and he could sees only one, yet he stood completely frozen, trying to reach for the lights with it. Well, his feet refused to obey. No matter how much he strained, nothing budged. He screamed internally for his body to move, but it ignored him entirely. He called for one of the lights to drift over, then another, growing anxious and getting nowhere. Since he could not speak, he could only watch as everything else stayed locked in his thoughts. Time dragged, and after running a whole gauntlet of struggle, irritation, and sheer dread, he finally went completely calm. So be it, he thought. This body felt fake anyway. If this failed, he would just sleep it off, so he kept telling himself that since he could not fight it, he might as well accept it. The instant he yielded, a few of the surrounding lights flared brighter and began drifting toward him. 5 distinct, shimmering clusters floated over, each carrying a tag, and he immediately read them one by one. The first choice was Cultivation, early stage stable, mid-stage sustaining, late-stage steady, and long-lived, not recommended for the impatient. The second option was Superpower, instant early effects, bursting in the middle, mastery at the end, 0 limits, and a completely fixed growth path. The third was Enhancement, body tempering at every stage, not recommended for anyone afraid of physical pain. The fourth option was Magic, meditation throughout, spells to memorize, not recommended for the forgetful. The fifth choice was Mech, guns early on, machinery in the middle, mechs at the end, a research path warning off non-specialist minds. He chose Cultivation without a single flicker of hesitation. What kid raised on those old legends does not dream of cultivating immortality? Plus, the late-stage path ran steady and long, exactly the kind of slow, sure climb he could believe in, while the early stage emphasis on stability and mid-stage endurance only called for patience, which he had in plenty. The system confirmed his choice, naming his. He chose the Cultivation path, activating his spiritual foundation and his spiritual root, which rated his elements as Metal 3, Wood 2, Water 3, Fire 3, and Earth 2. This unlocked his foundation and gave him a bonus technique, the Spirit Gathering Art, which was simply the method for drawing spiritual energy into the body, the most basic step of all, his consciousness then slipped back into his own physical body. When he opened his eyes, morning had arrived, and his status panel revealed a pretty grim reality. The system listed him as Yaben from the Snow Mountain region, a human now labeled a cultivator with the see-through talent. His cultivation realm uninitiated, and his technique the basic spirit-gathering art. Health 96, Stamina 98, Energy 97, and a combat power of 3, below average for humans. Thankfully, his gear still provided the warmth set with its warmth, defense, and speed bonuses. His pet was listed as a level 5 snow fox cub with 100 loyalty and 25 combat power. With her traits, his inventory was 3 of 11 slots, holding 3 blood pills, 5 spirit pills, and 6 fox meat. His survival points had crashed down to 2. He had spent 500 points only to emerge an uninitiated cultivator with the exact same 3 combat power he had started with. Everything looked completely unchanged except for that spirit-gathering art, his uninitiated realm, and the new word slapped onto his race, cultivator, an uninitiated cultivator. He had known perfectly well that choosing cultivation meant a painfully slow start, but he still felt a wave of melancholy staring at it, especially when a friend request popped up the second his eyes opened. Grassland had sent over a message, absolutely amazed that he was cultivating. Then asked, swearing he only wanted to know out of pure curiosity, why his combat power was still only 3 after cultivating, purely curious, as if that Junior had been standing right in front of him, he was sure he would have caught him laughing at his pointless cultivation, but Grassland was his only friend, so he had to reply. He wrote back that his cultivation was practically useless, getting the self-deprecating joke in first, and whether the guy laughed on his end did not matter since Yaben could not see it anyway. Grassland replied quickly, telling him not to worry, that maybe this was just the very beginning and hard work would show later. Words. They did absolutely nothing to comfort him.